Good evening. I'd like to be able to start the town council meeting for Thursday, December 1st. Would everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag, the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Chairman Rothaus is going to be late, so I will do my best to proceed with the meeting until he returns. And when he does come, he will take over as chair. Announcements. Upcoming town council meetings. Thursday, December 15th at 9 p.m. is a regular meeting. And we're going to be starting the budget meetings, remember. Thursday, January 5th, 6:30 p.m., a budget meeting. Thursday, January 12th at 7 p.m., a regular meeting. And Wednesday, January 18th at 6:30 p.m. It has here regular meeting. Is it regular or is it budget? Okay, it says regular, but I'm sure it's budget because it's Wednesday. Okay, any announcements, Paul?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. The tax bills were mailed yesterday and should have been in your mailbox today or tomorrow.
It was.
Yep. I'm the Grinch. They're due by the 31st of December. Just if you didn't get your tax bill in the next couple days, you could check the kiosk on the web or call the town clerk tax collector and they can get you a duplicate tax bill out. Saturday, the 3rd of December, will be the holiday concert, and that'll be at the high school cafeteria. The 4th is the town celebration and parade. What I heard is that there is a battle of the floats this year. We have more floats than
really?
we've had in a while,
Ah.
so it should be a pretty nice parade. And there are a bunch of individuals who are vying for the best float award. And not to mention, I think the best float will be the last float when Santa and Mrs. Claus come in. But they'll be here. I'll get that out. I don't have that right now. But you can check the Parks and Rec website, and they have the concert and the parade, the times available as well. And then on the 17th, I'll defer to Nancy Murphy on the 17th because there's another event happening with Wreaths Across America, and she could fill us in more.
Sure. On Saturday, the 17th, we will have the second annual Wreaths Across America celebration event at Last Rest Cemetery. It starts at noon and will be followed directly after by a refreshments at Our Lady of Mercy Church in the basement. So it's a joint effort of, I know, is it Franklin Savings Bank, I think, is going to provide some refreshments. The Knights of Columbus, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts. It'll be quite a great day, and all 650 wreaths for all the cemeteries for every veteran in Merrimack have been supported by residents. So thank you to everybody.
And there is a ceremony. It's not just of the laying of the wreaths. There's actually a ceremony that takes place before it, which hopefully it won't be snowing this year or raining. So come on out, and if you haven't, check it out. It's quite an impressive array in this on that. That's all that I have, Madam Chair.
Very good. Are there any comments from the press or public? Seeing none. There are no recognitions, resignations, or retirements, so we move on to appointments. First on the appointments agenda is Community Choice Aggregation Program follow-up discussion. The Town Council to receive an update and discuss the details of the Community Choice Aggregation Program, an optional buying group organized by a municipality or group of municipalities to benefit electric customers, as presented at the November 4th, 21 Town Council meeting. And this is being submitted by Bart Fromuth. Am I saying it correctly? You can come right up if you like.
Yes, Bart.
And there's two of you.
Yes. So Bart was out, sent me a message this morning telling me he wasn't feeling good. And I said, please don't come, basically. So these gentlemen were here before us before. This is an update. There's a lot that's gone on in the state with this program. The last time they were in front of us, it really wasn't progressing in the state. There was some legislation that still needed to be. That has all passed, and these gentlemen are here to let us know how the program has progressed in the state and what, if any, steps. Take it away.
Thank you for having us. I'm Stuart Ormsby. With me is Mark Capodola, both from Colonial Power. Colonial Power Group is paired up with Freedom Energy Logistics. That's the company that Bart is president and CEO of. So just as a very quick reminder of what community power aggregation is, what the opportunity is, it's an opportunity for a town or a city on behalf of its residents and small business consumers to launch what's called an opt-out aggregation program. And so you are, on behalf of your residents who are currently taking last resort supply service from Eversource, you start a program. We'll go into the details a little bit, but at the end of the day, what you're doing is you're giving them an option as an alternative to Eversource energy supply, and you are, through the assistance of Colonial and Freedom, you're going out into the market and procuring electricity supply in a more sort of thoughtful manner compared to how Eversource does it. And what's important to emphasize is, as I said, it's an opt-out program. And what that means is that all the consumers and small businesses who are currently with the utility supply will be in the program unless that individual customer specifically opts out, right? And that, the importance of that allows the suppliers to have interest in the program because there's sufficient size, sufficient stability to serve that load. So for some updates on what's happened since the last time we appeared before you, which was back in November of last year, as Paul mentioned, they have, over the course of that time, and Colonial was intimately involved in the process, the Utilities Commission in New Hampshire was required to establish some formal rules around how this is all going to work. So we were part of the stakeholder group working on those draft rules, and also part of the formal process before the commission, providing our comments and suggestions on making enhancements. Those final rules were adopted back in October. So that means that New Hampshire is good to go in terms of programs, putting plans together. The plans need to be filed with the commission for their approval. And we can talk a little bit about what that means. And then once the plans are approved by the commission, then the community is free to launch its program. A bit of an update on sort of how things are progressing. There were a number of communities in the state that had filed plans even before the final rules are finalized, trying to get a head start. So 4 plans have been approved by the commission, so they're free to go to market when it's advantageous to do so. And there's about another 9 or so plans that are pending commission review. Touching a little bit on the local process, if Merrimack were interested in pursuing this, the statute is fairly specific on what the local process needs to do. And so one of the first steps, if the council were interested, were to establish what's called an energy committee. So you'd name 3, 4, 5 individuals who would be part of that committee. The committee then would work with Colonial and Freedom to create what's called a plan. There needs to be a formal plan. Now, it's not like starting from ground zero. We have created a plan that meets all the statutory requirements. The language in the statutes in New Hampshire are very similar to what we've been doing in Massachusetts now for about 15, 16 years. So it's, for the most part, the plan is there to sort of meet the statutory requirements. It's not so much the plan that the community would use to sort of message to its residents. That's sort of a separate process. In any event, so the Energy Committee would work with us to finalize that plan. The statute requires that the Energy Committee hold no less than 2 public hearings to solicit the input from residents and small businesses. And then once that process is completed, we do any fine tuning on the plan, go back to the council for its okay. And once the council signs off on that plan, then it would be filed with the Utilities Commission. And by statute, the commission has to review and hopefully approve that plan inside of 60 days. So it's a quick turnaround, and they've been doing that very expeditiously. In fact, I'll quick comment. I mean, their review, they have largely approved all of the plans, the 4 that I mentioned earlier, not only in that time frame, but doing so with a 2-page order. So quick and easy. So then it's a matter of, everything I just described, really all you've done as a council is you've left that option open, right? There's never been a commitment that you've made. You've kind of gone through the process. Now you've got your plan. Then you can decide, okay, when or if ever do we actually want to go out to market and offer that as an option to your community. The town hasn't expended any money, hasn't made any formal commitments. But certainly what we would hope is that when there's an advantageous time to go out to market and lock in an attractive rate for your residents, you would say, let's do that. And we would help run the competitive procurement, soliciting bids by, between 4 and 6 suppliers who are actively bidding on aggregation programs in New England and signing a contract. So that's sort of the thumbnail sketch of where we are. Happy to respond to any questions you may have.
Questions, anyone? No? Well, I did. Go ahead.
I know I asked this before when you were here, or someone was here, about what happens with those customers who are with Eversource or other energy companies, because we have a couple of others that have infiltrated the market as well. So what happens with those relationships? Because if you're with another energy company, you have a contract with them.
Correct.
For a specific period of time.
Right.
So do they have to opt out of your program, or does the program take them over, or what happens?
Right. So what happens is the Colonial in the town would only receive information pertaining to customers who are currently taking a last resort supply service with Eversource. We don't even get, say you have a contract with Constellation as an individual resident, we don't get your information. So there's no mistakenly sending you something in where you might be fouled up with your contract with Constellation. Now, if, say, 6 months down the road, the program is launched, it's 6 months in, and your contract has come due with Constellation, at that point, you'd be free to opt into the town program if you wanted to, or re-sign with another directly with a competitive supplier.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I had a couple questions. You had mentioned, are there 4 other municipalities who have signed up, and who
Yeah.
would those be?
Yeah, so 4 plans have now received approval from the commission, and they are Lebanon, Keene, Enfield, and Exeter.
And there are 9 in process?
Yeah, and so they include Walpole, Peterborough, Hanover, Durham, Swansea.
Okay. One of my one of my questions had to do with at what point does the town council, are they required to make a decision? You've answered that. That's after the review. And not the review. After the meeting, the group has met, developed a plan, that plan's been reviewed, and then at that point, we can make a decision.
Right.
I want to be able to know the pros and cons, which would be answered by that, in my opinion. Hopefully, that review would help me understand the pros and cons of it, because obviously you want to be able to do pros. That's what you're supposed to do. Mm-hmm. And there are obvious pros, but I'm sure there are cons too that I would want to be able to become familiar with. And my comfort level is improved because it's not a commitment to the end, and there's time to know pros and cons. Did you have a question?
Well, just to clarify on what you're saying, Our commitment isn't until after you go out and submit RFPs to suppliers and we see those proposals coming back. Up until that time, we could not make a decision and say this is not for us. Or if those proposals come back and they're not any better than what the average market is, we could walk away at that point.
This group would have to approve the plan first, and then we would go to the PUC to get that plan approved. But
You need to turn on your mic. Thank
my
you.
apologies. This group would approve the plan.
Yep.
And then we would go to the PUC. Once we get the approval on the plan, still nothing has happened. But it wouldn't be a commitment until the town signed a contract with a supplier. So after the fact, we would say, hey, this is a good time. I'm making up a number here. So, we have 8-cent power for the next 36 months. We think this is a great deal. We've been using Constellation. Constellation is the winning supplier. At that point, you would give direction to the town administrator to sign off on the contract. That would be a commitment for the town. But I want to make sure I'm clear. At that point, what you'd be doing is bringing a choice to every consumer in Merrimack, right? Every consumer would get a mailing. And if they did nothing, your hot button item, it's an opt out. Let's just say they took the thing and they threw it out. I'm not interested. They're enrolled in the program. They have to sign the card, send it back, so that it's an opt out, meaning they have to, then action has to happen on their part to not participate. Hot button item.
Right.
Okay. That's one of them.
Yeah. And thank you for being very clear on that.
Okay.
It is good to know that you have to opt out. If not, you're enrolled in. So
I will say, if you did threw that away, nobody's trying to hold anyone in this program. But 2 months from then, you find out you're on the program and you wish to get out. Free opt out. You can opt out at any time without fee or penalty. So it's not like it's not like you slip one by them. It's just if they were on vacation or whatever, somebody can always get out and get back in. So that's really not a problem. That's how these programs are set up. It's really about bringing choice that currently, you guys know better than I do right now. I mean, you're in a pretty high rate, right? So a 22-cent rate. This would just be another option that would be out there for the consumers of Merrimack that they don't currently have.
Go right ahead.
have of the 4 that have approved plan, has any of those 4 made it through to send out solicitations for RFPs yet?
Not yet.
Okay.
And
Abysmal
why do you think
market
that
conditions.
is?
Abysmal market conditions.
Meaning there's nobody offering a better contract price?
The two things, there's still a couple of things market-wise. They don't have a situation. The utilities are still working on what they call POR, so that they can bid. And that's a purchase of receivables program, meaning that they're going to automatically get paid all the suppliers because it's a must-serve. That's perfunctory. They're required to do it by the PUC. We're waiting for that in January. And then it's really a terrible time in the marketplace right now. It's just a bad time. I mean, historically, I've been doing this for 20 years, never, not even half this height. I'm shocked.
Did you have a
You
question?
got more questions, though?
Well, I do, but go ahead.
Well, my question is more for on the consumer end. Like, all right, so the town does this. We're in the program. Are they going to get a bill from Consolidated, XYZ, and Eversource, or is it still just like we do? We get a bill from Eversource, we pay Eversource, and then Eversource cuts the check.
Exactly. That's what you're. So the customer will continue to still get a single bill from EverSource. Right.
And I want to make note, all of those, I'll call them utility benefits. Say you had budget billing, automatic withdrawal, a low income discount or any of that, all of that stays in place. Those are utility discounts and they're all going to stay in place. This is simply a single line item change. That's it, rather than it saying standard offer, it's going to say Constellation Merrimack Ag. That's the change. That's all.
Lon and then Tom.
Yeah, the more I hear about this, the more I'm aware how old I am. I want to go back to the very, very beginning. We talk about an energy or committee to explore this. How does that get in place?
So the council would name a committee, would form a committee.
Or ask the administrator to create a committee.
What would happen is that, like any committee, like when we started the Agricultural Commission, it'd be the same thing.
Okay,
Start with a charge, the council would start with a charge saying this is what you're looking at.
so we're involved from the get-go more so than what you indicated in terms of once this committee comes up with a plan, and
We
shows
would
it to
have
us, and
members
then it
on the
goes-
committee.
starts. But
You certainly could.
'Cause it
by
was
naming a committee, I suggest we sort of supported the rest of the process.
Well, in my
And
opinion,
again, that's why, I'm just saying
Yeah,
from
no,
where
I
I've
understand.
been in the past. Opt out, extra line on my utility bill. Every month, it's gonna say something about, would you call it ag, something? I don't know how much junk mail I get, but there's an awful lot of it that doesn't ever leave my hand other than go into the recycling. I might tear it in half. In that mailing, which is another question I'll ask in a minute, but in that mailing is a card. I read my electric bill. I don't know whether I would notice another line or a different line. And I asked a year ago how much that would be. And I guess that depends on how much you think you're saving us.
It really depends on market conditions and the load profile of the town.
Okay. Back to the question I said I'd ask. Who organizes the initial mailing and who pays for that?
The supplier will pay for it. We'll give all the mailing materials to the council to review. You'll see them beforehand. That mailing comes with the city seal on it so that everyone knows that this is coming. It's a city program, town program, so that everyone knows that it is coming from the town. Again, I'm guilty as you, sir. I'm not going to lie, it happens, but it's not like we're trying to hold anyone in this program. It's the way energy works to create that load profile so that we can bring suppliers to the table. Because if you think about it, if it was an opt-in, how many people are going to opt in? What's the bid going to be? How much is it for? What's the term? Doing it this way, it's an energy, unfortunately, the energy markets are still a little bit arcane, and that's the best we can do to bring the choice and competition that we're looking for.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Tom,
So let me try to add a little bit more to that. I currently purchase my electricity from North American Power. And so on my bill, which I don't get a paper one anymore, it's all online. But if you go online and you look at it, there's two sections that you guys referred to. One of them is the electricity charge, and the other one is the distribution charge. So the electricity charge says it's coming from North American Power. I would want to opt into this program if we were to develop it and use whatever rate the town could get and go with that company instead of the current one I have, because it's too much trouble for me to keep worrying about whether I sign the right contract with them. So I'm on their default right now, which I think is still a penny or two less than Eversource. But, you know, it's the default, where hopefully if we have a committee along with these folks that are looking at power rates when our term comes up and needs to be redone, they would be looking for the best deal or a good deal for the town. And the idea is that if you've got 8,000 customers or 7,000 customers and you're looking for a deal, you're going to get a lot more opportunity or strength in your bidding than if it's just one or two or three individuals. And so I'm in a program where you can get individuals, but it doesn't necessarily do me a lot of good. It gives me a little break. So I'm all for the idea. I guess the devil's in the details, and that's part of why we're discussing this tonight. You talked earlier about the Energy Committee being formed and setting up the plan, but everything seems to come back to the town council for approvals, which I guess is good. So the town council is still in control of everything that goes on, and since we represent the people as elected officials, it makes sense to me to do that. Back when you presented this a year ago, one of the things in the steps in the process said that the town makes it, the plan's included as an article on the town meeting agenda.
Right.
Yet you didn't mention that tonight, and I'm wondering if that was a change in the rules or,
Well, apologies. I mean, I have to defer to how Merrimack is set up. This evening, I sort of jumped to the conclusion that the town council has the authority to.
You don't have town meeting.
we
Any
do have
longer.
town
You
meeting.
do have
You
town
do have a
meeting?
town meeting.
Oh, sure.
Okay, so it actually would need to go to town meeting to be
Okay,
passed.
so my
And that
apologies.
body-
I
we
have to
thought
defer
this
to the
body-
knowledge in the room on what.
Yeah.
Okay, no, that's fine. I just wanted to
I was
clarify that because that's going to impact either how fast we have to go in order to get into the town meeting this
That's
year,
right.
or we're going to wait another year to get into another town meeting.
Right, because my understanding is, I mean, some town councils have authority.
Most cities do, but, and Merrimack has a fair amount of authority budgetarily and things like that, but any cost items still have to go to the town meeting. And this would probably be something we'd want to put before the town meeting, just to see that we in fact do have the town
Yeah.
backing for it. Although I can't imagine an argument for why it would not be a good idea, personally, because I'm doing it right now.
But
So doing it as town.
But I guess the thing is that it wouldn't go in front of them this April. It'd go kind of like when we did the charter commission, when the whole plan got finalized, that would be what's being voted on, correct? And not just, do you want to try to enter into one of
Right,
these?
you'd have to have the
So it would
plan
be-
in place.
You would have to have a plan in place to say, this is what we're doing, this is this, this and this. So it would be a year from now anyways,
Right.
at a minimum, a year plus.
A year and 4 or 5 months.
Yeah, because the first step would be the town council to,
Develop.
on an agenda item, to say, we're gonna set up this committee, here are the ground rules, here is the charge. And then 30 days to get people on this, and then meet over the next 6 to 9 months to get a plan in place to come back, to say, yep, here we go, and then go out. But yeah, I think we definitely would have to put it out on a warrant article.
Ron, you had a follow-up question?
Yeah, I recall the Charter Commission being elected. So I don't know whether the council here would be interested in electing a planning committee for this
Not me.
great deal. I'm about as opposed to this right now as Tom is for it, just so the council knows from where my questions are coming. I've been trying to think of a parallel, but I haven't been able to talk myself out of the thought that we'd sort of be going into the consumer protection or consumer whatever business as a town or as a town council. I'm not at all comfortable with that role.
You want to respond
The
to
big
that?
guys call it picking winners
I
and
might be able to
losers.
help them though.
Okay,
Well-
go right ahead.
Mark Capadona Colonial. So currently, you're getting electricity from someone that is not managing the process at all. All they do is go out mechanically and buy twice a year, whether it's high or low. They're indifferent to price. So what you're getting right now is an unmanaged product. Just twice a year, they go out and they buy it for those 6 months. What we're talking about here is a managed product. It would be every year you throw a dart and that's the stock you get to buy. That's the day you get 2 days a year to trade your electricity. This, we have 210 days and we can go out for 3 years, 4 years. We can go out for 1 year. We can manage the process. Their hands are tied. We have consistently delivered stability and savings. I mean that, and everyone thinks, oh, they're out there working on our behalf. They're just executing a process. They're not managing electricity on your behalf. The reason they do that is so that people would move to competitive supply. They had to sell the generation. They no longer, all they are is a poles and wires company in Eversource. So right now, all they're doing is saying, exact the date, I'm not sure here, but in sometime in 2 months before, here, I'm going to buy the energy, for everyone on the residential load. Whether it's a high day or a low day, they still buy. 2 years ago, we're at historic lows. Did they buy for a long time? Everyone would have bought for a long time. By law, they're not allowed to. Their hands are tied. This allows you to say, hey, we're at a historic low. We should be buying now for 36 months, 48 months. We can do that with these programs. Unfortunately, the utilities cannot. So there's so many more options when you get to the table that once educated on MuniAg, it will carry the day. I promise you, you'll understand and you'll see that, yeah, we have a better option here. I'm not saying the price is always going to be lower. I could never do that. But I'm saying to you, you're going to have a stable price that is going to work out better than what the utility is in the long term than the utility can deliver for you, because you have options they do not.
Any questions? Okay, my opinion is it's almost like no harm, no foul at this point. We're not committing until we get more facts.
Correct.
So that increases my comfort level. The town council or their representatives, however we decide to do that, appointing or whatever, I'm sure some members of the council would be on it, but maybe some educated people in the town should be as well. That would be investigated. All those issues would be, one of my concerns, for example, I was concerned about opting out. Well, who's even going to know? Well, we could build in some assurances that all of our citizens would be noticed, receive notification more than just an envelope or a postcard. We could think of things to help protect their interest, that, they know they can opt out, whether it be a fluorescent card from the town council, something that would make it different and more obvious. But those are the kind of considerations that would happen during these meetings where we would be represented to assure the protection of the citizens. And if it's not a good deal, then we don't sign the deal. Right now, I don't think we
agree.
I don't think we have anything to lose, except maybe some time of investigation. So I agree with Tom. And I'm not sure, would we need more time to think about it? Or do people feel comfortable making a vote about becoming? Or how do we do it, Paul?
Bring it back, another meeting on old business. And then we'd vote. You'd vote on this, how many members you wanted in the committee. The committee setup, 2, 3 counselors, maximum of 3 counselors.
Yeah.
Kind of deal. And committee, how many members at large? I would assume myself, 3, if 3 councils want to be on it, 3 counselors, 2 councils, whatever it is. And then how many members at large? We do all that setup. We take a vote at a later meeting between either next meeting, probably January, because the next meeting's filling up, probably a January meeting. And then we start the process, get a meeting set up, 30 days for committee, interviewed by the council. Then we do an appointment in February, March, and then we kick into high gear for the next 12 months to get something ready and available.
How does the rest of the council feel about that? You know,
I'm good with that. I understand that there's process that has to be
Process.
taken care of, and we have to go through it. I think this is a good program, and I encourage people to consider it. The idea of an opt-out program or forcing everybody into it or something brings out memories of bumping and all those kinds of things where people have been in programs and then they get bumped back, and we're not bumping people into a higher rate. We're at best, we're going to leave them alone and not do anything, or we're going to find a better rate and use the aggregate amount to get that better rate and put them in it. They can always opt out of it. Anybody like myself will not automatically go into it because I'm already on a different program. So, I'd have to take the extra effort to get into the program if we get to that point. So the only people that are going to get changed would be the ones in Eversource, and they're not going to get bumped back unless they care to, or they don't pay the bill, which is the other option, I guess, the other situation. If they fall behind on their electric bill, or they're going to get knocked out of this program, or?
No.
No, Eversource, believe it or not, is in charge of that. So it would just be a disconnect. It's the only, if
What-
they didn't pay their bill.
Yeah,
And then when they came back, they would go back to standard offer with Eversource.
with Eversource.
But if they don't pay the bill or not, it's still the same. That's that purchase of receivable program that I was talking about. That will be implemented by the time we get up and running.
Right, but if they got into a situation like that, it would effectively put them back over into Eversource. They'd have to opt back into the town program.
That is correct.
When they
David.
got their utility hooked back up or whatever.
That's a correct statement.
Okay.
Yes.
No, I'm comfortable.
You guys feel? So we have a consensus to at least have it in the old business in a future meeting to talk about specifics? Okay. Good enough? You have enough? Yes, Barbara?
Also, while we're doing that, can the town manager please check with legal to determine if in fact this is something that has to go before a town meeting to be discussed or voted on by the town?
Excellent.
Or is it something that is within the charter, within our power to go ahead and instigate this? Since it is an opt-out program, the options are there. We're not forcing anybody, we're just making something available.
Good idea. Everyone else set?
Okay.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
Good evening.
Bye, thanks, guys.
Okay, item number 2, under appointments, fire station feasibility study update. Submitted by Fire Chief Mark DeFranzo, Town Council to receive an update on the fire station feasibility study.
Madam Chair, as you know, about 6 or 7 months ago now, we tasked the fire chief to go about and verify locations for potential fire stations in town. Robert McNally's here, from Beacon GIS, his company we went with, and he's done a job looking at a lot of different things and locations. And he's here tonight to update the council on where this study has led him. And once again, this is a plan that, it's just one more tool.
Yeah.
It's one more tool in the toolbox as we move forward. There's been a lot of talk about a safety complex and trying to locate a safety complex and things of that sort. And I think after you see this plan, it will kind of make this a little more clearer where location of a safety complex may need to go.
Thank you, Paul. Good evening, council. Thank you for having us. So like Paul said, I came to you understanding that we need to start looking at facilities. And if we're going to spend millions of dollars, why don't we figure out what do we have? Is it in the right locations? If it's not, where would be good locations? So I came to you months ago and said I needed a sum of money to hire a consultant to help us make some good decisions as we go forward as a community. If we're going to be spending our money, let's make sure we do it properly. So after going out to bid, Beacon GIS with Robert McNally was the successful bidder. He spent a whole week here in our community. We took him all over town to show him all the unique things that Merrimack has and the living conditions and things that have just grown over the last number of years that we have here. So he also took our data that we've been collecting for years in our Firehouse software program. So he had like 15, 20 years of data to be able to plug into the computer systems to generate information for us to understand where the work is that we do. So this was a great opportunity for us to kind of learn some of the things that we do as a department and, where the needs are in the community. So Robert was able to put that all together. So tonight what you're going to see is the final presentation of all of the efforts that he's put together and spoke with me and members of the department and other people in town to try to gather as much information to put a good picture together for us to decide how we want to move forward as a community. So with that, I'll turn it over to Robert McNally, and if you have any questions, we'll do our best to answer them.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thanks, Chief. Good evening, Council.
If you could
Glad
pull
to
the
be-
mic just a little closer to you, and
Sure thing.
thank you.
Council, great to be here. Good evening. This is the final report for the fire station feasibility study. I want to first congratulate you and compliment you on taking this step. Fire stations are not cheap to build. They can be in the millions. And so taking the first step of just spending a fraction of that to find out, should we build a new one? And if so, where should they be? So you should be congratulated for taking this particular step to find that out first. There's a little bit about me and about the company. Been doing this since 2005. Worked all across the country, parts of Canada. Seen a lot of fire stations, a lot of fire departments. This is the scope of work that was in the proposal. Basically, look at the bottom line with this is look at the fire stations, evaluate them, see if they're in the right locations, take into account population, land use changes, development, critical infrastructure, any barriers that you might have, physical and natural barriers, and the transportation infrastructure, and put together a report of findings. The report starts off, it's over 100 pages. It starts off with town history, which I'm sure you don't need to have me tell you what that is. The current fire department operations, if you're not familiar, and then some of the fire department history, which the chief has already explained to you from his previous meeting. In July, I was here for a week, like the chief has noted. I looked at all 3 fire stations. I also talked with the firefighter shifts as far as the strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities and threats for each one of the fire stations. They had some good things to say. They had some not so good things to say, and that is detailed in the report as well. My findings are that Station 1 and 2 are inefficient for operations for a modern fire department, and they're not conducive to growth. They're too small and too cramped at this moment. So to continue to use them, they would have to have significant renovations to use the existing facilities and to be able to use them into the future. Station 3 is rather a mess right now, but it's a good place for storage. But it's beyond its use and it cannot be used currently for a manned fire station. It wasn't even designed for that. So one of the first things that I do is I look at the current conditions of what is happening within the town. This is the pattern of incident demand within the town. You can see that most of the demand is along the Daniel Webster Highway from north to south and on the east side of town. The demand for service has risen 47% since 2002, 20 years ago. 62% are for emergency medical incidents. And to note, though, that because they are the most prominent calls for service, when somebody needs to be transported to the hospital, those transportations have to go out of town. So it takes time to go out of town and time to come back. It's just what it is, being where the hospitals are. I look at seasonality. Seasonal highs are, there's a little bit of a bump in December and January, and then in the summer months as well, it's higher there. And then the daily hires are during the weekdays, a little bit less on the weekends. Typical demand during the day, during the daytime hours is busier than during the nighttime hours. We'll look at some of those charts too. Most frequent addresses include the turnpike itself and medical facilities, followed by industrial complex calls. Mutual aid is when Merrimack either provides fire services outside of the city or that they request fire services from neighboring fire departments to come in. It has dropped off significantly since 2006. But right now, still, the fire department is a net giver of aid, meaning they go out of town more often than people come in. Other departments come in.
Can we ask questions while you go along, or?
Sure.
The green dots in Litchfield, why are those there?
There must have been calls at one time.
That we were called to go across the river end to Litchfield?
Yeah,
That took us a long time to get there.
it sure did. Sure did.
So that was a call for a mutual aid call out of town.
Yes, sir.
But what we're really interested in is our own town of Merrimack
True.
utilization. Okay.
True.
So I don't know how much any of this gets confused by mutual aid mixed in with.
It's just a matter of the analysis point. So yeah, I don't take those into account later on when I look at where the stations ought to be. I don't take into account the calls outside of Merrimack.
Okay, thank you.
So the National Response Time Standard Consensus from the National Fire Protection Association near Boston is doing some time studies of fire behavior, has determined that from when an emergency is dispatched to the arrival of the first unit on scene, that should be in about 5 minutes and 20 seconds so that they could initiate extinguishment of the fire and or emergency medical service. The collective assembly of firefighters working to a working fire. Now, of course, sometimes they get dispatched to fires and they're not actually fires. But once it's confirmed that there is a fire, the other firefighters come in on other apparatus. And so the collective assembly of that apparatus and the number of firefighters, the standard consensus is 9 minutes and 20 seconds.
That's the standard consensus based on a dense population, or?
It's the National Response Time Standard from the National Fire Protection Association for this is the code number 1710 for a career fire department to respond to a critical report of a fire, a report of a critical medical emergency.
If I could, that again, the NFPA takes a lot of opportunities to look at what is the most efficient way to mitigate and take care of an emergency. So they've taken a lot of data, and that data has shown the most efficient mechanism and timing is about 5 minutes and 20 seconds to get your first piece of equipment there. And if you do have something of a big nature, within 9 minutes and 20 seconds, you need to have that assembly of X amount of firefighters with X amount of equipment to manage that problem the most efficient way. Again, that's what they believe to be the industry standard. That doesn't mean you have to be there all the time, but if you want to try to figure out where do we fit, they've given you at least something to look at and understand, well, what do we do based on the average or what industry standards say? So does that help you with what those numbers mean? They're just numbers at this point, but
Right.
when he goes further on, now you understand where we sit based on the standard that is out there that everybody tries to meet.
Okay, thank you.
So looking at how the Merrimack Fire Department performed here, the first time response time performance is within 9 minutes and 33 seconds, 90% of the time for the first arriving. When it's the national standard is 520. So that's what the performance is according to the data that was provided. This is the amount of call. This is the response time by call type. Fires are at 9:44. Medical emergencies, which are the most, are at 8:38. Response time versus the hour of day and the workload. The orange line is the number of calls that occur, and the response time is the blue line, irregardless of the call type. So the response time really doesn't vary by either the workload or the time of day. They get out, they respond. It pretty much takes about the same amount of time. So looking at it geographically, using the travel time network that is here, using the speed limits that are on the roads right now, from the stations at 4 minutes, 31% of the incidents are covered. And from 8 to 12 minutes, 93%, which falls in line with the first arriving at 9:33, 90% of the time. So really the 8-minute travel time is what we're facing, what is more likely to occur and match the response time that the Merrimack Fire Department has.
Excuse me, you have a question, Barbara?
Yeah, a question for you. You just said that that was based on the speed limit set for the town. Why wouldn't they be traveling under lights and siren?
Well, what it takes into account is the speed limits, but also that you have traffic congestion. And so it takes into account that and the turns that they have to slow down for the turns and negotiate traffic. It might be stuck in the line waiting for a light. So that it compensates for all that missed time.
So yes, you would think that with us having lights and sirens, we can get there a lot sooner.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
Because you
So
get backed up.
he's
but
using
still.
the average of speed limits to at least give some benchmark, because there's really no true picture that we could provide to understand, well, how often did we get there a minute faster or 30 seconds faster?
Right.
So do we really try to figure that out, or do we just go with an average to give us a picture to provide some level of understanding? So that's kind of how we approach that.
It's the actual speed limits, but it also takes in what you have to take into account is that when it's dark or it's foggy or you're in a snowstorm, you're not going to be going the speed limit at that particular time either. So this takes that into account as well. So the response capability, this is a map of the extent of the first alarm capability, which is the amount of firefighters and equipment you need for a fire. NFPA 1710, once again, the national consensus, says for a house fire, you need 17 firefighters to effectively and efficiently mitigate that incident, to reduce the property loss that's occurring with the fire. For an apartment or commercial fire, you need 27 firefighters. This is what, once again, how they looked at fires and the results of fires, and the best outcomes came when we had these amount of firefighters doing these critical tasks in a certain period of time of arrival that mitigates the incident. Right now, the
Does that
Merrimack,
make sense in Merrimack? I mean, we don't have 17 or 27 firefighters.
No,
I
you
don't
do
care
not.
what your situation is.
no, you do
And
not.
we're not gonna for a while, because that's very, very expensive.
Right.
So why are we comparing ourselves to something like that? I mean,
Well, I think, again, to understand when we start to place fire stations,
yeah.
you need to understand that you're right. We only have 11. We may never get to 17. So if we're only going to have 11, where do we want the 11 to be to give us the best impact to provide services the most efficient way possible? You don't obviously want to put all 11 firefighters in the northeast corner of the town. That wouldn't make any sense. So how do we figure out the best way to manage the people that we have? And as we go forward, can we afford to put more people on? How do we, and where do we put these people? So this is, you're just getting background information now to understand when he starts to get to where fire stations should or shouldn't be. This is how we're trying to derive to that final answer that we're trying to get to. So this is all just basic background data information that I can see from most of the faces here. You're kind of frustrated with some of the information that you're hearing. But this isn't, again, from my understanding, you've heard some of this before, that NFPA 1710 is a standard that we'd like to try to meet if we can. So we're just trying to do our best to lay down the groundwork before we go further with where we think fire stations should
Is
be.
it fair to say this is just a baseline that you're using to measure yourself against?
Correct. Because what else do we do?
Yeah.
How else can we?
Does anybody else come close to meeting this baseline?
Obviously, bigger cities do. You're right. Smaller communities are way less than what we're doing. But we have to figure out a benchmark. Well, what do we compare ourselves to? Do we compare ourselves to a big city? Probably not. Do we compare ourselves to a small community that's rural and in the middle of nowhere? Probably not. So we have to look somewhere. So since the NFPA is the standard that most fire departments follow, and that's what they do, provide information and standards. That's what we looked at to try to figure out where should we fit. Doesn't mean we're going to meet that standard all the time or any of the time, but what can we do to try to do our best to meet the standard that's out there?
Lon?
Yeah, it's probably way too early to ask the question, but where are you with this, chief?
As
In
far
terms
as,
of the baseline serving what
I
we're
think when
trying
we
to
get to the
accomplish?
end and you see what we'd like to try to achieve, it makes sense. I will tell you that during the whole entire process, Mr. McNally was very conscious of the financial ability of the community, because that has to take a part in the process. So when we get to the end, you will see that we didn't just say, yeah, we need 27 fire stations. That's not practical. That's not going to happen. We also know one isn't going to work for the town of Merrimack. So when we get to the end, I think it'll all hopefully come together and you'll get the better picture. So,
Run away.
no, I will be here and we'll answer questions all night if that's what it takes. But I think just kind of work through the first part of this till we start to see, and hopefully it starts to come together for you. And if it doesn't, we'll ask more questions and we'll go through it. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah. This is a lot of background information just to sort of set the stage for the analysis of where how the locations might pan out. Response capability, just looked at the fire loss. Fire loss has increased since 2010. Just a note of fact of that. I looked at the community risks.
Do you have a question, Tom?
No, I'm frustrated.
Okay.
The data doesn't make any sense. It doesn't take into account inflation, doesn't take into account, doesn't describe that it takes into account anything. It just says that it's more expensive. Well, yeah, 20 years later, a fire loss is more expensive.
That is true.
I mean, that doesn't tell me anything. It just makes the council look bad because we don't have extra coverage on the town to meet the NFPA 1748 standard. Well, I'm sorry, we don't, and we're not gonna. I mean, that's the way it is.
One of the key factors I looked at was the community risk. What are the risks in Merrimack? One of them is population. So this map takes into account the population per square mile. So where more of the population is living up in the northeast part of town. Just that's one aspect of risk and what that population is like as far as income goes, as far as employment in the city goes, as far as education, that sort of thing. Gives you kind of an idea. Go into just describing the community within the report. How the population has grown since 1900, really exploded in 1970s, 1980s, and has continued, but kind of leveled off as far as the explosive growth that occurred back in the 70s and 80s. The age of the housing, you can see back in the 70s and 80s, a lot of the housing was built and it's kind of tapered off. Although there is a lot of development occurring currently, not only commercial, but multifamily housing that I can see from our station, our site visit in July. Looking at risk, how many people are over age 65, 15%. How many are disabled without health insurance, poverty? These are the people that are usually living in housing that may not be fully sprinklered, may not have fire detection systems, and they're at the greatest risk of emergency medical problems as well. These metrics are lower than the county, the state, and the nation in and of itself. So that's a good point. I looked at other things like where the flooding is. Kind of scared me a little bit because I saw that Fire Station 1 was right next to the river. So I zoomed in and I see that it's not in a flood zone, which is good. Looked at where your major arterial routes are. Looked at where hazardous material kept. We talked to the Regional Council Planning Commission about a potential passenger rail service from Boston. That's up in the air. There's a link to the website for Amtrak in the report. How many employers you have, how much payroll is being derived within the city, and the developments. I talked a lot about the developments in the report, about what's being built now that you know of, and what may come, especially with this passenger rail service. I categorized the land use by a risk level. So the lowest risks are things like conservation lands and parks and that sort of thing. And the highest risk areas are the industries, schools, lumber yards, lots of heavier industry is at a higher risk. So you can see the pattern of risk in your city. Pretty much on the east side of town, you have the higher risks. So we looked at population projections into the future. I looked at, did one based upon the population from the Census Bureau, did one also from the Regional Planning Council, and then there's one from the state. The 2014 and 2019 ones from the council and the state do not take into account the recent developments that is occurring here in Merrimack. So with that, did a workload projection, and you could see that workload's going to increase into the future. It has increased in the past. It will increase into the future. Okay, so
It will. How much? Who knows?
this is the methodology I use to locate and try to find out where the best locations for fire stations are. The question I had was, are the current stations in a good location? If they are, great. They're still going to take significant renovation for continued use into the future, or even currently, they're going to take a significant renovation. But I just wanted to have a clean slate and just say, okay, let's take into account the population and the land use risk and also where the incidents are and give that a weighted score and assign those scores to each one of these cells. And so what the computer does then is says, okay, based upon how many fire stations you tell me to look for, I'm going to try to make this the total score as optimal as possible. I'm going to try to get as close to 100% as I can using how many fire stations you tell me to look for and also how much travel time you tell me to choose. If you tell me 4 minutes, like NFPA 1710, I'll find that spot. If you tell me 8 minutes, which is kind of what is basically what Merrimack Fire Department is doing now, I'll find those stations. So that's what the geographic technology does. So I started with just finding out how are we doing right now. So with the current stations right now, at 4 minutes travel time, the coverage is 24% of incidents. At 6 minutes travel time, less than half of the incidents are covered within that travel time. And at 8 minutes, it's 77%.
That's an aggregate of all incidents,
Yes, sir.
medical and fire and,
Medical and fire in the
Also-
town only.
pardon?
In the town only.
Right.
Okay. So I said, okay,
Hold on a second, Barbara.
And does that include any calls that are mutual aid coming into the town?
they do because Merrimack would be,
So wouldn't that
Responding
skew the
to that.
data as well? Because now you've got a longer response time coming in from, say, Bedford or Nashua?
no, ma'am, because the Merrimack Fire Department would be responding to that call. You would have I don't include the calls that are outside the town. So if Merrimack Fire is responding outside,
No,
of
I'm
the town,
talking about outside coming in.
outside. I don't factor them in since Merrimack is already responding to
No,
those calls.
they
This
may
would
not be.
Yeah, so, well, again, we have to look at what we do here in Merrimack, and most of the time, a Merrimack piece of equipment would arrive first. So that's what these data cells are telling you. So a Merrimack piece of equipment in 8 minutes, 70% of the time is arriving within 8 minutes, something from Merrimack.
Okay.
Again, now there are those outliers that we can't predict, but I don't think that's a big volume number to really
Okay.
look at. Merrimack is very lucky that we're able to get to all of our own calls a very, very large majority of the time. It's very unusual for us to rely on mutual aid to come in and take a call for us. If that does happen, and I've only been here a year, but so far from what I've learned, it's mostly EMS because our ambulances get busy, so we might have to rely on a mutual aid ambulance to come in. But I have not heard a fire truck have to take a fire call here in the town of Merrimack since I've been here.
Okay.
Now, they may have taken a call because we're at a fire, but we brought fire trucks in to cover our fire stations. Well, this data set would still mean the same thing. Something coming from a Merrimack fire station,
Okay.
getting to a call here in town would still generate the same
Same data.
percentage of time
Okay.
within that time frame. Does that help?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
And just out of curiosity, emergency services and fire calls are the same timing, or can you get faster with just an ambulance or faster with a truck?
You would think that, but no.
That's just a question.
Yeah, no, I know.
Thinking.
Sometimes, when I first started, I would think, geez, the big red truck, people are going to move right out of the way. They don't. And then I figured with an ambulance, well, I'll be able to sneak right through. No, I can't. So, no, there's really no clear, easy mechanism for us to get emergency equipment wherever it's got to get to. So, but yeah, no, that's how that works.
Okay, thank you.
So I began looking at a single fire station. Where would that be? And so I ran it at 4 minutes, 6 minutes, and 8 minutes. You see the addresses there. The 6 and 8 minute mark picked the same location at Continental between Daniel Webster and the Turnpike interchange. But as you can see by the coverage, the table on top, the coverage suffered with just one station. So it was clear to me that a one station department is not gonna do it.
So
for you.
can you better explain what you just did about this chart? Because I went through all these twice and still have no clue what they mean. So you're saying that in this chart with one station for 6 minutes, it would be located on Continental Boulevard? Would be the best location spot for a single one?
That's correct, sir.
Basic, and it's the same for 8 minutes.
It happened to be the same for 8 minutes. Yeah.
Industrial Drive and the Everett Turnpike was the 4-minute number.
Yes, sir.
But did those show up here anywhere, or we just need to kind of remember where those are? They're not plotted on your map, are they? Or
Yeah, they are. I don't know if you
Okay,
can see
well,
them. They're the
what I'm
boxes
asking
with
to
the
see.
stars
Huh?
on the map.
Yeah,
That's
that's a green one. Oh, that's the 8-minute one,
right. The
Okay.
6-minute one is hiding underneath it because
because they're both there.
they're both there, so you can't show them both. They're the same spot.
4-minute one is on industrial. Okay.
Right. Right. But the coverage of the scores, that total score that it takes into account incident demand, population, and risk, the amount of reach that this one station has is not as good as what you have now. So it was clear to me that a one station department wasn't going to be a good thing for you to adopt to do.
Andy, you have a question?
Just to clarify, to make sure I'm understanding what you're telling me. So if you do a one station where you have the 4-minute plotted, that is where we get the absolute most coverage within 4 minutes at that location.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
So I said, okay, show me 2 stations. It showed me 2 stations in different locations depending on the time travel to provide coverage. Note that none of the current stations were selected as a optimal location. Other locations were. Station 2 I moved northeast toward the turnpike. And then Station 1 also moved to the north, up toward Bedford Road. The coverage improved because these locations are more optimal in the 4, 6, and 8 minute mark. So if you were going to have 2 stations, these are where those 2 stations ought to be, and improved it by some degree.
Barbara, you had a question?
Yeah, when these were being plotted out, is it just all based on location and time, or did you also take into account availability of real estate? Because where you've got that station on Bedford Road, that's a graveyard.
Yes, I did. Availability of land. So when this plots it, it takes that cell and it says that's the cell for the optimal location. It could be anywhere
In that neighborhood.
in that close proximity to that point.
Yeah, because when I looked at these before, there was like every place you wanted to put one, there was no availability of real estate.
Right. So in the report, I said, okay, these are the spots. Great. What's around the area? What's an available parcel? And I took things like the cemetery out, and had a list of things within a close proximity to them, and these are the parcels you may want to take a look at. So, and they were parcels that were not built upon, but I also took out the cemeteries. So this is, although it seems precise, this is any one of these points that you decide would be a good place to when you decide to move forward. It's in that close proximity to that point area.
Paul?
And granted, this scenario is saying that we're going to build 2 new stations.
Correct.
And he's done several scenarios with different options. And he's just showing right now the options.
One of the options.
If we wanted to, you build 2 new stations, you'd get up to XYZ. And that's what this is saying. If you were looking at building 2 new stations.
So I'm sorry, ma'am.
Thank you. I just a question around the times. Is that the arrival time, or the 4 minute, 6 minute, 8 minute? Those are the arrival times, or is that the time where you have everybody there that you need
That is the travel time from the station.
alone? Okay.
Yeah, that's the travel time, not the amount of time it takes to dispatch the firefighters.
Okay.
Not the amount of time it takes the firefighters to be alerted
Yep.
and get into the truck.
Okay.
It's from when the time the wheels on the truck roll
Yep.
to when they arrive and to where can they reach. So that's what the geographic technology does. It brings it takes them on the roads and it spreads it out, and it's trying to find those optimal points to get the best score possible. So I've highlighted here the 90% mark. That's kind of where you would like to be, because the NFPA 1710 is at the 90th percentile, 90% mark. So you want to be at a coverage of about 90%. Even if it's at 8 minutes, this is kind of what you're doing now, is an 8-minute travel time. So you kind of want to, if you're going to build new fire stations, you want to improve the performance as well. You want to improve the coverage. You're spending a lot of money for fire stations. Let's improve the coverage. I said, okay, let's look at 3 stations. Where would these 3 stations be? Once again, none of the current fire stations were selected as an optimal location. Now, the one up on Bedford Road is kind of close to the current fire station 3. Question is that lot big enough? Is it feasible? I don't know. I'm not an architect to answer that question. But once again, it's in that proximity. This particular map is the 6-minute one. That's 3 stations, and it improves the 6-minute up to 86%, which is pretty good. It's one of the better scores that you'll have here. And you can see where the locations are based upon the 4 to 6 and the 8-minute travel model. So then I said, okay, if we're going to go to, let's look at 4 stations. So now we're getting into some serious cash. And this is where I was starting to get nervous.
Don't get
Serious from
Don't
day
get too
one.
frustrated now.
So I looked at it. I looked at the 4 stations, and yes, so you get up to 6 minutes. Now you're at 96% at 6 minutes, and these are where those locations are. Okay, the NFPA 1710 says you need to be at 90% at 4 minutes. I looked at that option. It was more than 4 stations, and I thought that wasn't really fiscally prudent for the type of town that Merrimack is. So the bottom line is, what you want to do is look at these scenarios and say, which one is the best that will improve our response coverage to the town. Whether it meets 1710 NFPA or not, which one can, if we're going to do this, where the stations need to be, I'm showing you that, and how much can we improve our coverage by putting these 2 stations together. So the next thing I wanted to look at was, I know that fire stations are very expensive. Once again, I compliment you on taking a step to find out what the optimal locations are, rather than just, renovating the current stations and that's it. But so I did some scenarios based upon the current stations, because once again, the unanswered question I have is it feasible to renovate where you have them now? They would need renovation. They would need expansion. Is it feasible? So I ran 2 station scenarios. I kept station 1, relocated station 2, kept station 2, relocated station 1, and here they are, the locations for that. The bottom line is I did it with 3 stations too. If you keep both stations and you add 1, if you all the way around, you could twist that scenario. I've run the numbers, and the bottom line is the scores aren't as, at about 8 minutes, they're a little bit better, but they're not as good as the new stations locations. Obviously, the computers being has to use the current locations. So in these different scenarios. So as you've seen, none of the optimal scenario scores use the current stations. Therefore, the scores are going to be lower. So if you look at just 2 stations, right? If you look at 2 new stations, the highlighted area on 8 minutes is higher than using the current station. But it still can be done. You still improve it from 77% to 80% and 82%, but you're spending a lot of money to renovate these stations and maybe relocate or build one, but you're not getting that much bang for your buck, so to speak, when you keep the use of the current stations. Does that make sense? Same thing with the 3-station scenario. Once again, they all do go up, but it's almost a matter of course they go up because you're adding an extra station into the mix. So of course they do go up, but you get a better result if you build 3 new stations in an optimal location versus using the current stations and building another one. Although it does go up to a degree. I highlighted the 86% on the 3 new stations there because that gives you a significant increase in coverage at 6 minutes.
But interestingly, current station 2 and 2 new stations is not that far off. I mean, it's 81 instead of 86 at 6 minutes.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
But that's still a marked improvement of close to 2x. But I find that interesting, leaving station 2 where it's at.
Yeah, yeah.
Again, part of what we asked Robert to do was, what if everything to death? Because if we don't, the public's going to ask the question, well, did you look at if you could reuse Station 2?
Oh, yeah.
We need to make sure we checked every single box that we could. And while I understand some of you are frustrated that we did some of this work, we have to have answers to questions that are going to come up if we want to move forward. So we tried to do our best to run every single thought, every single scenario that we could think of, so we would have some type of answer. Instead of saying, oh, gee, we didn't think of that. Then how much credibility do we get to put into this report and what we decide we want to ask for to help improve what we're trying to do? So I appreciate you working through some of the frustration, but I think you're seeing some of the fruits of what the database had to be put together to get these answers that we're showing you now.
So you have some options. Obviously, the first one is the status quo. You can do nothing. The problem with that is that your fire stations are inefficient. They're cramped. You're growing already. The town is growing. You're having new commercial projects going on. You have new multifamily housing going on. If that commuter rail comes through, there's going to be a lot of developmental pressures that you're going to have to face. And right now, you've got some room for growth. You're sandwiched kind of between Manchester and Nashua, but you have some developmental opportunities here that are you've already seen it happening. So with that, the stations themselves need to have some renovation to them, and that requires space. And I don't know if the lots that they're on can accommodate that space. I don't know. That's one of the questions you might need to look into with an architect is, can this be renovated? But you've already seen that these locations are not optimal to cover the town. You can do the 1 station. I don't recommend that because the coverage suffers. You can do 2 new stations. That improves the scores a bit. The 3-station scenario improves it even more. I think that at that level is probably where you want to be, as opposed to the 4-station or more level, because it's fiscally not prudent to get to that level. So 3 stations, the 3-station 6-minute model improves not only the amount of coverage that you have, but puts the stations in in an optimal location for you. So that's the choice result, is that the 3-station 6-minute travel model gives you nearly 90% coverage. And you might be able to use station 3. I don't know.
And are these the 3 locations that 3-station scenario suggests?
Yes, sir.
So Bishop Field and Continental Industrial and up where Station 3 is.
It's not surprising, is it?
No, I mean, we've been talking Bishop Field
That's
for
right.
15, 20 years. Since the 70s. So that was before me.
When we moved in to Greatstone, there's a fire station coming someplace between Bean Road and McQuestion.
Yeah.
So they've been talking about it since the 70s out that way.
So the best choices of all, obviously the most coverage. The more stations you have, obviously the more coverage you're going to have. If you had deep pockets, that'd be one thing, but we all know that's not the case. The most improved coverage is the 6-minute, 3 news stations in optimal locations. That would give you the best bang for your buck as far as coverage goes. The best 2-station scenario is 2 news stations. That gives you better scores than keeping any of the current stations that you have now.
And remember to go back to what the standard was. They wanted us to be 90% in 4 minutes. We're 90% in 8. So if we can get to 6 with an investment, that probably makes the most sense. We're never going to get, because we can't afford to get to 4 minutes. There's no way, in, like he said, unless for some reason Deep Pockets happen to move to Merrimack and decide to invest heavily, I don't see us doing that. But I think the 6-minute mark is something that I think we could shoot for. I think it's reasonable. It shows improvement. And it's, again, from what we've learned, it makes the most sense. So does that kind of help bring what we started with to where we are now?
Kind of.
A little bit? Okay. Look at it. I made progress. I'm happy. I'll take the progress a little bit.
Okay, so then I also laid out for you the best choices using the current station. And if you compare the scores once again, they're improved, but they're not as good as using optimal locations. The benefits that you're going to have improved response coverage. Potentially, you've improved the insurance rating for the town so that people can enjoy a savings on their property, on their homeowners insurance, their commercial insurance, because you have more coverage. You enhance your first alarm assembly because you have more apparatus coming to a fire that's nearby. That will result in reduced property loss. You increase your EMS resources, which will be able to answer the majority of the calls that occur now. And then the improved facilities give you room for future growth. You kind of need that growth now with the facilities that you have. Station 2, you couldn't put one more person in there. Station 1, very difficult to put one more person in there. It's already been modified to for the additional people that were with the SAFER grant hired in there. The approach that you might use, and this is only one of them, certainly it really depends on a multitude of factors that come into play, but one of them is suggested maybe build Station 3 first, because that improves the overall coverage, but and then move the administration to that station, and then build 2 and then 1. But it really depends on a number of factors: property availability, which station maybe not more likely to need the growth, the room for expansion. So it really depends on a complex factors that are of a local nature that you have to decide upon.
And which station, where would you put Station 3 in that approach?
Well, you would have to choose between the optimal location scenario or the use of a current station scenario. The best results.
The building that's there now and use all the property for a new station.
I'm sorry?
Station 3.
Yeah, Station 3.
Yeah, Station 3 ended up being in the McQuestion Road area, which the town already owns the property. Am I right? Is that
Yes,
the right-
yeah, we're not
So-
talking, we're not talking Station 3 reads,
So
the old
that
GE
plot would not be
station.
big
Oh, no,
enough
new Station
for us to
3.
do anything. So while this is his recommendation, we have to understand and interpret what the computer's telling him and say, that doesn't really work for us. But at least we have information, and then we can figure out the best direction for us as a
What
community.
plot is not working?
McQuestion Road, because that's where the computer said the optimal location for Station 3 would be that area of town. However, that piece of property to put something there to then move admin there as well I don't think it's big enough to accommodate.
Is that Bishop
of that.
Field we're talking about? That's not big enough for a fire
Well,
station?
there's already play fields there already, correct?
Well, so much. I mean,
Well, no, but I mean, if we start to take play fields away, that's another issue we have to work through. And is that the most feasible thing to do?
what's
There's a
more
lot
important?
of things that have to happen
yes.
before we even move, but we have to give you the information so that we can pick a direction.
But we bought that property and put a fire station on it.
Yes.
A PlayStation has gone on secondarily,
Okay.
Playfield. And
But
as far as
once-
I'm concerned, it's expendable for a fire station.
Others
if we
might
need it.
disagree with you, so that's why everybody has to have a part to play in this. The public, the politicians, and us as providers have to make sure we're all on the same page. But if we don't have a direction, we don't really know where we're going. So at least we have an idea of how it might work for us.
Finley?
Sorry for my delay in getting here. I was trapped in Boston. But is your suggestion a temporary housing of administration at Bishop Field if that were the location? Or are you talking about making that a central station?
We haven't made any decisions on
Okay.
anything.
And so
This is
sizing
informational
is-
only. This is what
Sizing.
he's recommending based on his years of experience in communities he's worked with.
Sure.
This is what he's recommending. We don't have to take any of this.
No,
So we
and I
have to kinda
appreciate all
decide.
that. I just was, when Tom was worried about the size, I actually envisioned that parcel, if it were used for that purpose, as I suspect it would be eventually, to house equipment and manpower, not necessarily for an administrative permanent location.
So the size would be different.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Might be.
So, okay, thanks.
Yeah, and like I said, this is just one approach. And the reason I put this approach in is because obviously the extra station improves the coverage. And that was the goal of trying to find out where to put your stations. Now, once again, there are things that availability of land, the current accommodations being what they are, you may decide to go with station 1 first or station 2 first. It's perfectly acceptable. You have the locations in this study to know where to put them based upon the travel time model. So you can decide which one we do first. This is just one idea. So some of the drawbacks, obviously, the current stations, significant renovations are needed. The lots may not accommodate any growth. Growth has been and is and will continue to occur here in Merrimack. It's going on now. Lots and lots of things being built. I was just here in July, and since then, I know it was dark outside when we went by, Chief, but they cleared out over by St. Gilbane's, that whole commercial thing that was being planned back then. So things are happening already. New stations, obviously, they procure land. It's a lengthy and costly process. It takes time to do that. And then an additional station requires staff, and if you don't have the apparatus, you have to buy as well. If you have the apparatus, great. Then you already have the equipment for it too. Then it's just a matter of staff. These are some other recommendations that I have for the fire departments, mostly fire department specific. But the bolded one is that really should strive for the 7 minute 20 seconds, which is the 6 minute travel time model, to 90% of the emergencies within town limits. That's what the goal should be, that you should set for yourselves. Doesn't mean you have to. Just a recommendation that it's the best response coverage that you can get for your money. One of these are in here for you. Obviously, you need a professional recommendation regarding the current lots, if that's the way you decide to go, and the cost of renovation of those stations on those existing lots. And that's the final report.
A lot to digest, truly.
It's over 100 pages.
But again, the task was to figure out where should we put fire stations, since we know we need to do something. Where should they be if we're going to invest? That's what all he looked at. So as far as how they're going to be built, what they're going to look like, that's another step and another thing to go through. So this was only to focus on where should the fire stations be, since we all, I think, agree we need to do something. So if we're going to spend $1, where's it going to go? So we
best
brought
value.
him in to figure out the areas. So again, where you see, doesn't mean it's going to go to that point. So you're right. It might be on a cemetery lot or wherever. Well, can we find something close that can work for us to meet what the standards say, and what can we afford? Because I agree with you, Mr. Koenig, we can't afford the Cadillac. But can we buy a Chevy with some decent options? And I think it's out there with work and trying to figure something out. But that's all he was tasked to do, was to find out where we should invest our money, again, if we decide to.
And I would agree that we needed some basis to work with. So I apologize if I came on too strong. But when you read these numbers and you look at them, it leads the casual observer down a trail that we'll never get to. So if we had a baseline that had a different setting, it would just make it a little more comfortable to try and work from it. But using the NA, whatever the heck it is, standard, is probably as good as anything, and we'll just compare ourselves against it the best we can. I guess part of my curiosity is, how do we rank, relative to our neighbors and stuff like that? Is Merrimack doing a good job or a bad job as far as fire coverage for the town compared to any of the other surrounding communities, and even the big towns, which is not what you were tasked to do. So I'm not asking you to come up with that answer, but
I know a lot of the other communities like in Manchester, Concord, and Nashua in specific have done recent studies, so we might be able to pull out. Again, those are big cities, and maybe we could look to see if other smaller communities, maybe they have some data that we can look at, because everybody's using software now for data and information. They might be able to help us understand how are they performing. Some of the real smaller ones that don't have a lot of data collection or aren't able to be as sophisticated might not be able to help us, but maybe there's some other communities that we can reach out to, which again is help us to be part of the process to figure out what do we, again, Merrimack, want to do. To be honest with you, I don't care what Nashua does, and I don't care what Manchester does. What is good for Merrimack? Because it's all about us. It's our community. What do we want? What do we think is acceptable? And this is what we can afford to do. So that's what I kind of want to look at. And I hope that answers a lot of the questions that you have as we go forward. I'm very conscious of finances, and I think the town manager can confirm that as well. We just did the budget stuff, so I understand. We don't have a money tree out back, so let's figure this out, and how can we work together as a group? And what does the town want? I don't know, but at least we can start somewhere and start to have open sessions and open meetings to ask questions, provide information, and start to learn how to figure out the plan.
And to piggyback on that, we've been talking about a new safety complex for 5, 6, 7 years. And we started looking at the safety complex and we got told, you got to be in this pinpoint. I'm kind of glad we didn't build one, because this study is telling us we shouldn't have been in that pin. We should be X, Y, Z, whatever on it. And this it's like everything else. We did the sewer plan. Sewer plan said, Kyle, correct me if I'm wrong, the first one was a $40 million project. Council looked at that and said, we can't hit that $40 million project. Let's start going down. The study is the same way. It's a study. We might not build Station 3. We might do Station 1, maybe Station 2, whatever. But get a plan in place that this is what we're going to follow and this is what we're going to look like. Because Station 3 comes with additional staffing. So now that cost isn't just construction cost, it's now some permanent costs attached to it too. Do we have the apparatus? Do we have the equipment? Conversations we've had, we probably do have some of that stuff in play with the apparatus, but it's the personnel, it's the staffing of that station. So those are decisions that we're going to have to make at a later time. But at least now we have a plan that says optimal coverage is, if we want to build XYZ, is in this area or in that Y area, instead of just saying, let's just move Station 2. How many years ago did we try that? Let's just move Station 2 to Continental Boulevard. Luckily, it was pretty close to where some of the pinpoints were, but that was just, well, we had land there from the school, so let's try to use that. So at least this gives us more information, more solid information to make an informed decision about how we want to move forward and what the council wants to do moving forward with this. And it might be a 7, 10, 12-year plan moving forward with some of this build out as well. But we know we have to do something, and that's why we engage this gentleman to figure out where at least one new station needs to be.
Nancy?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to thank you, excuse me, for the presentation. I think most of us, we pay a lot in taxes, so we're always worried about, it's hard. But on the other hand, I think we all recognize that though we may not often need emergency services, when we do, on that rare occasion, we realize how vital it is that they be able to get there quickly, whether it's for an emergency medical service or a fire. I think this actually just really does a great job of exemplifying how planning and building and development really impacts so many things. And for every high-rise or apartment complex that's built, it necessitates a greater need for our services. So, I'm all for meeting the needs of our people in a cost-effective way, and I think this just really points out the options that we have, and the people here will let us know, what they think. But I think it's a great sort of just it just provides a great picture of what happens in a community as it develops and the needs increase, the population increase, the development increase. So it's something for planning and zoning and everybody to take into consideration every time something's approved, because this is the fallout. And so I thank you for this.
Thank you, ma'am.
And lastly, I have 2 copies that I'll leave in council chambers. Sorry, I get to keep my own copy, so I can read
To
it.
bring home and read at your
Bring home and
leisure.
read when I'm working.
And we do have it electronically. If somebody wants their own, we can send it to you
We do
electronically.
have it for the council, so I'll put those in the chambers tomorrow.
So can I ask another question?
Go right
Chief,
ahead.
if we added a third station, how many people would we have to minimally cover 3 stations?
If I wanted Hollywood, I'd want at least 4 guys per piece of equipment. Realistically,
Per piece of equipment?
yeah, because a fire truck should have 4, a ladder truck should have 4, an ambulance should have 2. So let's staff them properly.
So do-
Understanding what we do now, we have 3 firefighters on an engine. So if you wanted 3 firefighters, 4 shifts, that's 12. I would like to get 16 because that would be meeting the standard that is set.
So 12,
12
On-
firefighters total, because there's 4 groups. We have group A, B, C, and D.
yeah.
If we put 3 guys on the fire truck, 3 times 4 is 12. 4 is what the recommendation is. But
Yeah.
again, we can't afford that.
Well, right now
let's
we
be-
have 11.
Right now, and we have 11 firefighters to cover different pieces of equipment. Again, remember, we're moving people from a ladder to staff the second ambulance, or we're moving people from engine 2 to staff the ambulance if the second ambulance call is in that area of town. So we don't have enough people now to put in all the trucks that we think we should have staffed. I would like to have all of the ambulances staffed with 2 guys each, and then the engine staffed with 3 people each. But like you said before,
So would I.
we can't afford that right now. We will take our time and hopefully get there, and safer grants are great opportunities for us to continue to look at. But we as a community can't afford that, take that steak and chew it all in one. We can't.
No,
But
I
can we
understand.
take small little pieces over time and figure it out?
But,
And I
but
think
given
that's-
our current staffing with 2 stations, if we put in a third station, we could spread some of that staffing out, so we wouldn't have to.
You would
Totally filled in.
lose. So if we took 3 firefighters from station 1
Yeah.
and moved them to station 3,
Yeah.
well, now I don't have as many guys in station 1 anymore.
Well, that's
and
true.
another piece of equipment comes off the line. So did you
Well,
really
but you
gain
got to
any?
move some of that equipment over to station
Yep,
3 also.
some
so-
equipment move, absolutely. But the ladder truck, which was a key piece of equipment for us, would now be out of service more often than it would be in service. So, because again, would you stick your ladder truck way out in that ball field? My opinion, probably not. It doesn't make the most sense.
Probably
So you
not.
put an
There's
engine.
not very many high
So now
rises
we
out
took
there.
all the guys that we're using to staff the ladder truck and moved them to cover an engine. And now we don't have that piece of equipment staffed. So now we're
Yeah,
stuck in the same boat again.
But maybe the ladder truck's not the first piece out that makes the first 4 to 9 minutes or something like that either. And-
Yeah, right now the engine goes out, but the ladder follows it right behind right now. But if we switched, well, that ladder truck probably is not going to get out because we don't have the staff to man it. Because we moved those people that are doing it now, we put them over here. And we only have so many people. We can only make so many trucks drive down the road. So once you start doing the shuffle game, because again, we can't afford to do it all right now, we can only do so many things at a time.
Not to belabor this, but what intrigued me was hearing that we're a net giver of mutual aid as opposed to a receiver of it.
Right.
Because I really thought that we were shortchanged, because that's what we'd heard for a long time. And you said since 2006, that was good for me to hear. I was happy to hear that.
Yeah, like I said, Merrimack covers the majority of its work almost all of the time.
So
And we are able to help others if they ask for help. We're able to help them too.
One of the facts that surprised me is a 20% increase in our population, 5,000 people. That's surprising.
Doesn't show up in the
That's
voter
the
polls.
amount
I
of-
wonder where it is.
Yeah,
It's development.
and it's
Oh, yeah.
not done yet.
So,
Nope.
so can you identify anything in 2006 that changed that model from a net giver to a
From
net
what I've
receiver?
learned is around that time frame, Nashua had Merrimack on an automatic response to the city of Nashua. The council at the time was somewhat frustrated with that, and I don't blame them. Hey, wait a minute. We're paying our guys to go work in Nashua? We don't mind helping, but why are we being it? So I think that's when the line got
I
drawn
remember
and
complaining about it.
the call, that's when everything changed. That's the only thing I can attribute to why that big number dropped.
I
It
remember-
makes sense to
I
me
remember
understanding
that.
Yeah,
history.
yeah, I just was.
Why
I
do we,
believe
I
that's
was
the-
Nashua.
I think it was a 101A area.
Yeah, and believe and
Yeah,
Station
but-
2 is very close to the Nashua line. It really makes sense for them. I totally agree. Look, I would do it too if I was the Nashua line.
We got
But
away with it. for
wait a
as long as
minute,
you
you
did.
know, Merrimack is not going to work for the city of Nashua. You know, that's not what we're here to help you, but not do it for you.
Not stupid. Yeah, I know,
Yeah.
I remember too.
Does that ring? I think it rings
Yes,
a
it
bell.
Oh,
does.
yeah.
I remember complaining, why are we supporting Nashua's fire department? Yeah. And it was 101.
Yep. 101A, yeah.
And again, our station can beat Nashua every day of the week, which is great for those people that need help.
Right.
They're getting something quickly.
You don't
But
plan
it's
it.
at the expense of the Merrimack citizens who are paying for them to have their own coverage for them.
Coverage,
And it's always more often than not out of town. Look at our guys, certainly appreciate it. They learned a lot and got a great experience. But, you know, can you afford to continue to do that? You know,
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Well, we have a lot to mull over. Thank you very, oh, sorry.
One last question. If now that we have the model built, if we had a piece of property that maybe didn't fit any of the current scenarios, but we had the opportunity to look at, can we take that and plug that in and say, what's going to be our coverage if somebody gifted us this land and we have an opportunity to build it?
if we wanted to Robert to do it, I'm sure there's a fee to attach it. He would do it, no issue.
I would never expect anybody to do it free, but obviously,
Is the model being kept and
yeah,
available? and-
exactly.
Yeah, so yeah, Robert can answer that.
Okay.
But again, I think if we're close to the ones that he's plotted out,
Yeah.
look at if we're in a couple of miles of where that plot is that we got, do we need to spend the extra money to figure it out? We're probably losing a couple percentage points when you start to figure some of those things out.
Yeah, because yeah.
And we looked at some of the bigger parcels in town that are still available. And we had Robert look at those as well.
Always thinking ahead.
Yeah, so we did some of that.
Thank you.
You know, in our back of our mind, the chief and I saying, if we move here, what would be? So we do have some of that stuff, but not having ownership. It's,
You can't talk about it.
we don't want
yeah.
to talk about it, but we did do some of that, looking at bigger parcels.
All set.
Again, thank you for your time and
Thank
and
you
what
very
do
much.
with us. I
Thanks, Robert.
appreciate
Thank you,
the
Mr. McNally.
opportunity.
Appreciate your efforts.
Anybody's got questions, certainly let me know. We'll do our best to get you all the information that you need, because at the end of the day, this is a lot. So,
Thank you for the
thank you.
information.
And just want to say how time flies. The chief's been here a year already. How quick
Does it
time
feel-
goes by.
Does it feel like 5?
No, actually, he's right. The other day, I thought, geez, I've been here a year. Boy, the time just flew right by. So it was
When you're
sluggish in the
happy.
beginning, but then
Hopefully that means you're having
we've done
fun.
some good work, and the guys are doing everything that we I've asked them to do, and they're working really hard. And you
Excellent.
know, we're all trying to do our jobs as best we can. So it's been a great experience
Appreciate
so
all
far.
that.
Great. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Thanks,
McAllister.
I do want it to be noted in the minutes that the chair arrived at 7:40. No, 7:40.
By which clock?
Thank you, Nancy. Just want to keep going?
And I'm now officially passing
wanna
over the
keep doing
meeting
it?
to you.
All right. My apologies for that lengthy delay this evening. All right, no public hearings, updates from our legislative delegation. Nobody's here, and I didn't look at my email. Nothing. Town manager report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Couple things. The parade on the 4th of December starts at 3 p.m. at Tractor Supply. Tree lighting is scheduled for 3:45 p.m. The route is from Tractor Supply to Town Hall. Also, if you would like your house to be on the Southern New Hampshire Tour of the Lights,
That's right.
please visit the Parks and Rec website and fill out an entry form. They will be, after December 5th, they will be coming out with a list of lights that if you like Christmas lights, you can drive around and see people's displays. You cannot nominate a neighbor or a house in town. It has to be the property owner wanting to be on the list. So just those are a couple of items.
Thanks, Paul. No consent agenda. Item 1 under old business, proposed winter maintenance, salt use policy and procedure follow-up discussion. We'd asked Paul to attend those meetings and have those conversations, and he's here this evening to give us the update.
We had a very spirited meeting with MVD and their consultants. They brought in a couple consultants. They talked about brine with us and using brine. They're worried that wells 2, the new well 9, and they're decommissioning well 3 because of the chloride. Well 3 is being decommissioned because of chloride and other substances in the water. But they were worried that with that, it would leak into 9 and 2 and really wanted the town to look at the salt use. Lori's here tonight, and as well as Kyle. They can discuss it more, but they have been very proactive in reducing the salt throughout town. We got a grant a couple of years ago that we've used there. We're using calcium now on our salt, and they just went through all-day training with all the drivers on how to use the calcium in the tanks and when they're applying salt. We do have a brine machine or trailer that was built years ago. However, as of today, I was told that we're about 8 weeks out for getting product to make our brine. We made a commitment to MVD that we'd try to use it in one of the wellhead areas and see how that goes versus other areas of town. While, you know, there's a lot of conditions that play into, you know, laying salt or sand on a road. Temperature is one, road temperature is another, length of storm's another, what type of storm. There's a lot of information, and we do have technical experts that have helped Lori in the highway division on this, and we're using their recommendations moving forward on this. Also, the other thing that came out of the meeting was that MVD got a grant for wellhead protection signs. They went out, about 36 of them, got about 36 of them in the poles. We'll be posting underneath them limited salt area. Actually, in the packets, I put what we're going to put, but so it's going to be wellhead protection. Then there will be a sign underneath it that from the town of Merrimack that's going out there when they come in. They're on order. So overall, the meeting ended up on a good note. I invited MVD here tonight and told them what we'd be talking about, and they seem to be okay with what we discussed and moving forward. And we're going to try it. Like I said, Lori, if you had questions about brine or the calcium application, she's here to discuss that with the council if you want. But we're moving forward to continue trying to reduce our salt use in town, but also we have to keep our roads safe for people traveling and passing on them. So, you know, it's and the usage of salt. So
Any word on the state being a little bit more cooperative? Because they have been one of the worst offenders, and it's their roads that are going right over the aquifer.
there is going to be a new DOT commissioner coming in. I don't know when. I know that the current DOT commissioner resigned. I don't know when her last day is. But we've asked MVD that to have discussions with DOT. One of the bigger businesses in the area has come to the table and actually has decided to go green a little bit, and they're testing that out this winter as well. So
Plus, maybe we should ask our state legislators to be able to be put a little bit more pressure on
I think
DOT or whoever the powers that be up there.
right, and you know I think that might work very well with them. Once again, though, it's
Yeah, that's-
you know MVD. MVD, we've told MVD that they need to reach out to the state. They have those meetings, and besides us, I think there might be one other person who attends regularly. Every now and then, other people try come in. We try to make suggestions on who they really need to get to the meetings, but we'll see how that goes. But for sure, they got to touch base with DOT and
Would
ask
I-
them to stop.
Could you talk with our state reps?
I could send them an email and ask them to talk about the salt usage on Continental.
Thank you.
Yeah, Representative Boyd currently sits on that committee with DOT,
Okay.
so that may be a place to start as well. And what, are we actually going to be using the brine in the areas of wells 2 and 9? 'Cause that's what your memo
Yes,
said.
yes,
Okay.
that's where we're trying. We're going to try it out on the Continental Boulevard stretch when the materials come in and we make our solution. So that's where we're going to try using it out first to see if it works.
Okay.
Can you expand on the requirement, the 8-week delay in getting brine materials? What's the deal? Got to be some reason to have you here tonight, right?
Yeah, sat around till nine.
That's on.
Is it on? Okay. Just like any other materials, parts, they're having trouble obtaining them. So a lot of things, temperature gauges, any tools, parts we're ordering right now has a long lead time.
So we're having to fix our brine trailer, or
So we want to enhance the brine. We bought the switch and go system, where we had the flatbed and we bought the chipper body. I want to put a brine tank with an applicator that has the GPS that tells us how much we're applying. The old trailer doesn't. We don't have any idea what we're putting out. It's a turn on and go. It was a test trailer, so so this is a little bit more advanced.
okay,
we'll
but
know how much
to do
we'll-
that, it's going to take some investment as well then,
Yes.
and we're covered there?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Thanks,
we'll
Paul.
leave it then. Thank you.
All right, anything further? Oh, sorry, Nancy.
I just want to say I'm really glad that we're trying this. I know I've attended MVD meetings in the past, probably 3 years ago, asking that we do this. Our town certainly sees the health impacts in terms of high blood pressure and those kinds of things from this salt use that gets into our, and we have enough health impacts from I think other things. So I'm really happy that we're going to try this, and hopeful if things go as I hope they will, that maybe we looking at other town ordinances or something, so that with towns putting in this effort, and then we have the same expectation of the state, that maybe there are parking lots in other areas that maybe we need to look at doing the same thing. So I'm glad that we're doing this.
Thank you, Nancy. Nothing further. We'll move on to item number 2 under old business. Council to discuss overhead costs for tipping fees. And I know during our goals meeting and on more than that occasion, Tom Koenig had really pushed to have a better understanding of how we come to these numbers and what we should do for the future. So, Paul?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have a quick presentation on overhead discussion. It's a good time to look at this again because as of December, our tipping fee rates change as well. So if we're going to make a change to the overhead scenario, we would it would be a good time because, as I said, the tipping rates do change. I want to apologize for the delay in getting this to the council. It was supposed to come at end of summer. We've had some other delays in it. Kyle is here to help with the discussion, as well as Chris, our solid waste foreman, who's done a lot of research on tipping fees in the area to see where we're at. The one thing about tipping fees is that communities usually only take trash from its own community. So even if, say, we wanted to lower our rate to XYZ, $100, do we want to start taking trash in from other communities? A lot of the other communities do not take trash in from other places. As a matter of fact, Chris has gotten several calls asking about construction demo here. Some of the other places that used to take commercial trash in the Bow Concord area have raised their rates considerably as well. So we're going to start seeing some more of the local vendors coming back to us, where in that case they were much lower than what our tipping fee was, and it was advantageous. But at diesel at $6 a gallon, doesn't make sense for them to be driving a truck up to that area. So they're utilizing the transfer station a little more as well. We're not trying to gouge anybody. We're just trying to recover some of our costs, as you'll see in this discussion. Recycling has gone through the roof. A glimpse of the budget you'll see tonight is how much recycling costs have gone up per ton, because right now the commodities, there's no market for it. Cardboard and paper, we were making money, now we're paying again significantly for it because that market has dried up because of the amount. So, Tom, if you want to take us through.
Okay. I am very happy and appreciative to see Kyle and Chris here in the audience, because if you guys have questions about this, I'm gonna look that way. So, we did sit down about a year ago and have a discussion about tipping fees for the commercial users of our transfer station and recycling facility. At the time, we agreed to revisit it down the road. I think the council had some concerns about the methodology of determining what our true overhead costs were, and they also had concerns. You also had concerns about how price sensitive the commercial users that do use our facilities might be, such that if we, it's one thing to try and recoup your costs, but if you set your price at a level that's going to drive those users elsewhere, then you kind of defeat the purpose. So I think that was partly your concern at that point. So back in last November, December timeframe, we did agree to increase the rates that we charge for trash disposal to commercial users to $133 a ton, which is comprised of $78 fee that we pay our third-party haulers, and then $55 worth of overhead. We set the construction and demolition rate to $150 a ton, Again, broken down $95 as our third-party hauler costs and $55 of overhead. And the single stream recycling charges that we set were at $124 a ton. And that was, we've never historically included an overhead component to that rate. We've just tried to kind of recoup what our third-party costs are. Over the past year, we've made out okay as far as the single stream recycling costs go, because the recycling market was strong at the beginning of that period. As Paul mentioned, it has since deteriorated significantly. So we've looked at that. I think over the past year, if you look at our third-party costs, including the transportation costs, that we've probably averaged about $100 a ton for costs, not including overhead. But so that 124 has certainly covered that and a portion of the overhead associated with it as well. But I think going forward, if you look at where the market is now, our costs for single stream are going to be more in the order of probably $150 a ton just for the third-party costs. So that's something we need to kind of factor into the equation. So obviously we've got some choices. We could choose to leave the rates where we set them a year ago, or we can take a fresh look at what it really costs us, and attempt to cover closer to 100% of those costs. Again, there's a number of different ways to approach this, and it requires some assumptions, unless we were going to do some very detailed time and motion studies of what goes on out at the transfer station. What we've done is look at what the costs are and tried to determine an overhead and a fairly simple model for doing so. So the first scenario that I laid out here was that would be a good idea. The first scenario that I laid out here was to take a look at all of the costs associated with running that Lawrence Road facility, and come up with kind of a general overhead rate for all the different types of trash, construction and demolition, as well as recycling. So what I've included are the wages and benefits of the people that work at the facility, vehicle fuel, maintenance of vehicles, machinery, as well as facilities, utility costs, insurance costs, and the other costs that kind of captures everything else, basically, that you'd find in that solid waste operating budget. The things that I have excluded from this calculation are capital reserve fund contributions. I know that was a bit of a hot button topic when we talked about it in the past, and I got the sense the general concession was that we did not want to include the capital reserve fund deposits in the overhead calculation, so I've left those out. And there are other costs that are kind of non-trash related, if you will, things like monitoring and maintaining the old landfill site. There's also a portion of the labor costs that could be attributed to things like the swap shop, which obviously are kind of a separate issue unto themselves, as well as costs associated with special waste disposal of things like propane tanks and electronics, things that we already charge a fee for. I've kind of excluded those from the calculation as well. So what you're left with is a total pool of overhead type costs of approximately $667,000 on an annual basis. If you divide that by the amount of tonnage of the three different types of trash or disposal items that we're talking about, trash, construction and demo, and single stream, 9,600 tons in total, you come up with an overhead rate of almost $70 a ton. So that's for your consideration. That would, with the new rates that we're going to begin to be charged on the trash and the construction and demolition, we're going into the second year of a multi-year agreement starting December 15th. The new rates to the third-party haulers for our trash is going to be $80.50 a ton, and for construction and demolition, $97 a ton. If you added a $70 overhead rate there, it would bring your trash rate up to $150.50, and your construction and demolition rate up to $167 a ton. To be consistent with what we've tried to do in the past on single stream, if we tried to just recover our third-party costs, right now we'd be looking at least $150 a ton. The difficult part about that is that the market for recyclables has been very volatile, may continue to be very volatile, could get better, could get worse. So that one's a little bit of a tricky situation to deal with.
That 150 is a guaranteed max.
Is it what?
Guaranteed maximum rate
For who?
for a single stream. We use a third party, and that's the guaranteed max, $150
For how long?
That they would give us for
for a year.
Right.
So,
Subject to change again.
man, help me understand the third-party hauler tipping rates. Is that literally just the tipping rate, or do we have a third-party hauler for our trash?
No, that's what we pay. That's what we pay Waste Management, is $80.50 a ton. That's what we pay Waste Management, $80.50 a ton. We haul it. We haul our trash.
We haul it.
And
So
we
that's
haul-
just the tipping fee.
That's just the tipping fee, and the $97 is just our tipping fee. Every time we bring a construction trailer up to Pennacook or wherever it might go, it's $97 a ton. We haul all our own stuff for both the trash and construction and demo. Single stream, we have a contract where they come and haul it out. So that's $150.
Okay, so the $70 overhead is our hauling. I mean, it says third-party hauler, but we're not
No.
paying anybody to haul.
No,
So
it would be
we're
our
doing it as
own-
part of the overhead.
The overhead would be our hauling charges. That's just our tipping fee.
And the overhead, you've got, at least in this scenario, you've got it spread across everything evenly. Is that
Well, that-
reasonable as far
this-
as the cost of managing the C&D versus the trash versus the single stream? Or
There's another methodology would be to try and spread it out according to the type of trash, and that's what this next calculation attempts to do.
If we can go back to the first slide real quick. This first slide is just saying, these are our costs. This is the tonnage. Everything's equal. This is the easiest way to do a quick and dirty overhead rate. That these are our costs. This is our tonnage. Here you go.
so
Then we took the next scenario. We took the next scenario and broke that down further.
So we've done quick and dirty multiple times now, and every time I keep saying, well, if we realize that the recycle center has a fixed cost and manning it has fixed cost, then there's some amount that is just going to be there. And the question is, what's the delta cost? So if a commercial hauler or some additional person were to come in and want to dump another ton of trash, does it really cost us $150 to handle that ton of trash? Or does it only cost us a small incremental amount overhead wise to handle that extra ton of trash? And that's where I'm trying to get at, to understand that we're going to provide the recycling center for the citizens of the town of Merrimack, period. That's going to happen. And so that cost is already all taken care of. So spreading that out on top of the commercial hauler that brings in an extra ton seems.
But really, you're saying in effect that the citizens in that case are subsidizing the commercial hauler. And I think what
Well, the commercial hauler is hauling the citizens' trash, who's already paid for the trash route transfer station. So they're paying twice for their stuff, because they're paying the commercial hauler to haul the stuff into their transfer station that they're being charged to use, that they've already paid for. So yeah, I'm saying that they should be subsidized some level, not 100%, obviously. They shouldn't bring it in at no cost, because they're making money off of charging people and stuff like that. But I think there needs to be some differences there, which is why I keep bringing it up and asking the questions, and don't feel like we're getting the same. I feel like we're getting the same quick and dirty, just spread the cost over everything each and every time. And it's not a way a business would operate if they were trying to do this for profit. And,
so you don't think they've tried to recoup
well, they try to
100%
recoup
of their
costs,
costs?
but they don't figure their cost out this way. I know that if you go to the industry that I work for, they have a sunk cost of $1 million to come up with the first chip. Well, they're not going to sell the chips for $1 million a piece. They're going to sell them for 50 cents a piece, because they're going to sell X million of them. And so somebody that wants to come in and buy 1,000 of them pays $6. Somebody that wants to come in and buy 100,000 of them pays $2, and somebody that comes in to buy 1 million of them pays 50 cents. There's got to be a difference in there in order to make it a feasible business, in my opinion. And that's why I keep asking it.
Well, I think if you look at what other communities are charging, the ones who even will accept commercial trash, which there aren't many of, and Chris and Kyle have taken a look at that, we're like the lowest. So
if we take commercial trash from
other
somebody
towns
outside of
are-
town, shame on us. I mean, we should only be dealing with in-town trash, because that's trash that's already been paid for by the customers in their property taxes. In this 600,000 overhead, they paid the property taxes. They're not bringing it themselves. They're sending somebody else to bring it for them. We're charging that person. That person's charging them. So they're getting double charged for the ability to throw out their trash. And so other
we're really
towns may
just
do
trying to
other things differently.
reallocate
That's
the
fine.
cost
But
to
this
the
isn't the
to
other
the
town.
users.
Okay, so understanding that, yes, if we were in that kind of industry that could sell X number of Y.
Yeah.
We're in an industry where we're kind of limited, because our budget says 6,600 tons. If we go to 6,700 tons, does that make the overhead cost a little different? Yeah, because most of our overhead is fixed. We have very few variable overhead rates in there. Diesel, you can consider it semi-fixed. Maintenance, semi-fixed. The more we use it, the more not. A lot of our costs that are associated in this overhead rate are kind of fixed costs. I know that I'm not bringing in another equipment operator 3, whether I get 6,600 tons or I get 7,200 tons. For that extra 600 tons, I'm not bringing another equipment operator 3. They might work overtime to make up that difference. So we're kind of, our overhead is kind of fixed. It does, and I get what you're saying, that if we take in 6,700 tons, what is the variance of taking in that extra 100 tons? And I do understand that, but is $50 a good number? We're just trying to show you that this is how much it costs us right now, based on our projections, based on our budget, based on what we expect to come in here. This is how much it costs us to handle a ton of trash. Is, in this case, $141 for a ton of trash, $161 per ton of construction material. And if we started looking at the two gentlemen that are in the recycling building, which we've never looked at before, but there's a cost for them too, it'd be well over $200 for single stream, because we have guys working there to load the trailers. Even though we're not driving them, we have overhead costs. We have electricity, we have gas, we have oil, we have heating, we have all those extra costs that aren't included in that $150 fee, whereas in our other overheads they would be. So to handle a ton of trash, garbage from your house, your chicken bones, your turkey carcass, it cost us for a ton $141 based on current budget, current scenarios, current tonnage. Same thing, like I said, with C&D. To get to that next level of how much more is this if we do it. We are seeing, Chris, correct me, or we're seeing an influx now because of what's happening in Bow. If you want to come up and explain that a little bit, we are starting to see that influx coming in. We're still paying the $80.50, well, it's 78, whatever right now, a ton for the tonnage, but our guys still have to take it, load the trailers. They're making more trips. So if you want to just
Absolutely, just to elaborate on that, the word on the street is the tipping fee at Zero Waste and Bow is now $200 per ton, where historically they've been the go-to for a lot of commercial haulers. But now that you're talking the mileage, the tipping fee going up, we are now the cheaper alternative and convenient alternative for trash coming from Merrimack. And the numbers show that. We've seen an influx of, for example, last month our commercial trash was 141 tons, but a year ago it was in the 60s. It's literally doubled.
The other thing is that these commercial haulers, when they come in, they're bringing in their packer, which is 5 to 10 tons or whatever, not 5 to 10
Easily,
tons,
yeah.
but they're bringing them in and they're dumping them on our floor. It'd be different if they were dumping them
in the
right
truck.
into our trailer. If we had an area where they could dump in our trailer, we don't have that in our facility. It'd be different if they were just dumping in our trailer, because then we wouldn't have to handle it. But they're dumping in our floor, so now we have to handle their trash that they're dumping on our floor to get it out of there, to drive it, to move it, to pick up those costs. And I get your point. I pay how many thousands of dollars in taxes? The only thing I get is fire, police, snow plowing, and transfer station. Now you're making me double dip because I got to pay for a private hauler to come because I'm not driving to the transfer station, and they're charging me, I don't know, $50 a week. I don't know what they charge. And I understand that it's a double dip. But what we're trying to show is these are our costs to get rid of 1 ton of trash.
Can we go back to the first scenario for a second? So your overhead pool, 667K,
Right.
but you're dividing that by all of your hours, the 9,600, but then you're only allocating it out to the trash and the C&D. You're not allocating it out to the single stream. So you're basically leaving 104K of overhead costs sitting in your overhead pool because you're dividing it by the total 9,600.
Yeah.
So where does that 104K?
Through the tax base. That's part of that's always been picked up through the tax base.
So then the taxpayers that's using the single stream, he's really not double dipping, because that the overhead cost that would be allocated to the single stream recycling is not being allocated to single stream.
No.
We're paying that through taxes.
Right.
So he's not double dipping.
Not on the single
Not
stream.
on the single stream, yeah.
Right. And we've never done that in the past.
Yeah.
And we've always just charged what used to be 3-4 years ago. We take it. You got it. Bring it in. We'll take it. Because we were making good money. And then all of a sudden it started shifting. The last 3 years it started shifting, and then it was like, okay, you got to pay $25 a ton. Okay, you got to pay $50 a ton. Then we ran out of contract, and then it was not to exceed $124 a ton. everything in, meaning equipment rental, transportation, everything was 124. Now this year it's going to be $150 a ton, all in, guaranteed max. And we're not suggesting the next scenario on the next page going up to $227 a ton, but this is the cost, of 265. We just want to show you that if we broke out this same scenario based on percentage and tonnage, this is what the effective tipping rates would be. Just to recoup our cost. Now, granted, all the construction material, the trash, and the single stream does come from Merrimack residents. So they are paying some of this, and they're paying for the transfer station as well in their tax dollars.
Barbara did have some a little bit ago.
Yeah, so a couple of questions and a thought. So for the single stream, are the commercial haulers bringing in recyclables as well? Or
Yes,
is it only trash?
Nope, they're bringing in recyclables as well.
So where's the logic there as far as not charging the overhead up to this point? I don't, if you're charging the overhead for trash, because someone is going to scrape it off the floor and load it into a trailer, someone's going to take the single stream recycling off the floor and put it in a trailer. So even though the overhead historically has been coming out of the general fund or wherever, the same logic applies to both because commercial haulers are bringing in recycling. So in my mind, that needs to also have overhead. Now, as far as the commercial haulers bringing in trash or single stream and having to pay the overhead, and maybe a town resident getting double dipped with this, I can see it. I see the argument. But on the other hand, that person made that conscious decision to use a commercial hauler because they didn't want the fun of going to the transfer station. And I'm sorry, I love the transfer station. So, that in my mind is a little bit different scenario. It's a person who made a decision for whatever reason that they can't or won't or don't want to take their trash in. So the fact that they're getting double paid, double charged, that's it. But I think the overhead has to apply across the board.
The only problem then is single stream, nobody would use it. Haulers wouldn't use it. You'd sit there and just pay for the lesser of the trash
At
instead
that
of the
point,
recycling.
they'll be putting that all in the
But-
trash
Right.
stream.
Maybe
So the overhead cost might match.
this is
your
why other
trash.
towns have made that difficult decision of maybe it's not worth it anymore.
Well, no, that's probably true. The reason we've kept with it, in our conversation, it seems like 2 or 3 years ago, is the market may shift back. Now it doesn't sound like it will at this point, but
It started to shift back this year because it was getting better. It was getting better, and then all of a sudden, don't ask me what
Right.
happened, but everything went. Starting in August, everything went haywire.
right. And then, but the reason we kept it is to keep people in that habit in case it did come back. So I suppose that's a discussion, but sitting here and charging the actual overhead like you're suggesting, it would stop.
We wouldn't get any commercial haulers
any.
because I can tell you right now, if I'm a commercial hauler, $9 a ton. Yeah, it isn't a lot of money, but that's $9 a ton in my pocket versus
They'll just put it in trash.
they'll just put in
They'll
the,
put
in the
in
trash stream for $9 difference.
But
That's their conscious decision. They gotta
then
sell.
you can also look at it from the point of view that our residents are picking up the tab for the commercial haulers to bring in their recyclables. So I guess we're more green than other towns like Hooksett who have given up their recyclable programs.
I fully
But
understand.
when it comes down to money, that's where we are.
I fully understand what you're saying there, Barbara, with it should be one for all and all for one with the overhead rate pushed out. That's one of the reasons why we wanted to show it on the slide is to get that discussion going as well on this. you know, but just to look at it, and when you look at the numbers, this is not an issue that's going away anytime soon. They're closing landfills. What's Nashua? $200 a ton? $300 a ton. Nashua's charging 300. They have a landfill, and they're charging $300 a ton to go in there, and they have city pickup. So their landfill is being that it's not lasting as long as they thought it would, and I think that's why they're jacking their price up. Chris, did you look into Merrimack's transfer station with DES? Can we take outside trash?
It's discussed with Kyle. There's the ordinance. We only take Merrimack trash.
Ordinance
It's also
does.
in our permit.
In our permit. So we're limited to Merrimack trash. So even if we wanted to say, all right, outside of Merrimack, we're going to charge you $200 or $250 a ton to make up some revenue on this to help offset, we can't, because our not only does our ordinance say it, which we can change, but our permit with DES says it's only allowed for Merrimack trash. So it's you know, it's we tried to show the easy way of $69 a ton. We just take it and do the quick math, and then we actually did break it out and the numbers. This would be the numbers looking at it. So basically, commercial trash would go from $133 to $141, $8. Construction demo would go from $150 to $161, which is $11, and then the discussion on single stream would be, it's going up from $124 to $150. It's what overhead do we add? Do we add the total overhead? Because it's only 1,500 tons versus we got two guys there. We got, the overhead, some of the overhead costs, things of that sort. As you can see, vehicle fuel is a lot less than if we're doing our own hauling, but we do have some equipment in there, the two Bobcats, the forklift, things of that sort that do take up fuel, and there's maintenance on it and utilities and things of that sort. So, and we've been trying to increase our single stream tonnage for years, and I think it plateaued, and it's just been the 1,500 is we can't get, we go up a little bit and then we come back down. So that it's there. It doesn't increase, whereas somebody who cleans out a house, our trash tonnage can go up.
Sure.
Because of the new places and things of that sort. And this doesn't include, Kyle's going to kill me for saying this, but this doesn't include our new apartment buildings. They're not bringing the trash to us. They got a hauler that takes it and
Goes right up.
takes wherever they go. Most of the wherever the haulers go, they don't. Those haulers for the apartment buildings don't come to Merrimack, because it'd be not a good use of their time saying, okay, let me go pick up Merrimack's trash, dump it into the transfer station. Let me drive to next complex XYZ out of town. So they just take it to where it goes.
Is it because of cost, or is it just because there's mixed?
It's mixed trash, because they're going to Nashua
That's what
doing
I mean,
stuff,
yeah.
Milford.
So it's not because of our costs?
No, it's not because of our costs. It's because of the trash that they pick up, that they're not coming in.
It's a combination.
But if somebody had just Merrimack businesses one day, they, if they wanted to, they could start coming and dumping on our floor, and we'd be at that level too.
Barbara?
Also, let me just ask a question. Are we seeing an increase over the last couple of months? Only because the reason I said this is I never used to see the guys out hauling the big, whatever you call those things.
The trash trucks.
The trash trucks away, when they move it away. And it seems like in the last 2, maybe 3 months, I see those trucks on the road now all the time. And I never did before.
We're seeing a rise by a good 20 to 30 tons last 3 months.
Okay. Well, that
absolutely
explains
right.
it.
All right. Where are we? is this, you're just giving us this update and then we'll be discussing this?
Well, we're at the
we need it
point
for budget
where
time.
well, number one, we'll be at it for budget time, but since we're getting a new tipping fees in December, we have 30-day notice to everybody, and then we have to put in the paper on the change of our tipping fees based on our ordinance. So if, the council is looking at this and saying, yeah, the 141, the 161, and the 150 at this time look good for a single stream, and then that's we would ask for a motion to say those are the new tipping rates effective January 15th. January 15th.
But we're saying for trash 141, C and D 161, but we're saying Bow is the next cheapest at 200. Is that what we're saying?
More or less, as far as a Merrimack option, yeah, Bo would be the next option. Trash from Merrimack.
We have input from the audience that says different, but I guess where I'm at, I wouldn't be in favor of increasing single stream that much and risk all of that going into trash because trash is now cheaper. Can we go back to the previous line? What I would be in favor of, instead of dividing the overhead pool by 9,600, we divide it by 8,100, which is the amount of trash and C and D, and that gives us an overhead rate of 82.38. Apply that to trash and C and D, which, if that's a true statement, it would increase both of those by $12.38, and it would still be cheaper than the next available option, but it leaves single stream at $150 per ton, and it still encourages the commercial vendors to recycle versus throwing all that stuff in the trash.
In that scenario, what you're doing is the two gentlemen who work in the recycle building, their costs then get pushed off to trash and C and D.
Yeah, is their cost
Up in
the $104K?
Up in top in the $403,000 there that they're included in that number. Their salaries and
The second
benefits.
scenario. Second scenario.
Their cost is part of this 172.
Where do I see their cost?
Well, the wages and benefits over under single stream is 142.
142.
Yeah, so
And
that
all
would
the
be
other expenses for working with single stream add up to a total of 172 plus.
Yeah, but in the first scenario, we're only saying the overhead for single stream is 104K in scenario one.
Where do you get that?
Well, if you take the 1,500 tons and divide that by the current 6951.
Multiply it. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Multiply by 6951. You're only coming to 104K, right?
If you tell me so, yeah.
But you're equalizing it out, where in fact there's more manpower used for single stream. The wages and benefits are higher in single stream.
What I don't want to do is get into a scenario where they just start throwing it in the trash because single stream, on scenario 2, single stream becomes $265 a ton.
If we believe these numbers, there's no point in doing single stream.
Right.
Period.
Right.
The town is paying extra for it as well.
Yes, we are.
I mean, I was okay with single stream up until it costs as much as throwing it in the trash. But as soon as it's
We've talked about
costing $100 a ton more to deal with single stream, I'm done. We're out, in my opinion.
I understand that.
Shut
and
it
that's-
down.
That's why we're bringing this forward in the discussion tonight, is because of when we're looking at this, it showed that there are some costs associated with single stream that weren't included in the $150. Now, yes, you are right. It's $104,000, but in scenario 1, we're just taking everything, throwing it in the pot. It's a fish stew. Throw everything in the pot, and then you just take it out, and that's why it's a 104. So versus the
Yeah.
versus this one saying,
96 and the 400.
yeah, because of the 1,500 tons. Now, yeah, so these are, that's simple option, or do we go, and what we did is we looked, if you go to B real quick, Tom, to look at this is we broke it out based on tonnage down below.
So that you would know.
But the single stream is actual cost of operating the single stream operation with the salaries and with the salaries of the 142. That's the two gentlemen to actually operate that area.
I included a portion of the scale
Scale,
operator
because the
in there,
scale, you gotta
too.
go over
He's
the scale.
Dealing with,
Yeah. So,
with that as well. So it's more, and then we've got a part-time recycling attendant in there too. So it's really a portion of the scale operator, the one part-time person, and the two full-time people are what's in that 142,000.
Okay.
you can do whatever you want. you're the
Without
chair.
objection, if, Rod, did you want to speak to something you, Andy had pointed out you may have? If I could. Yeah, if you would.
I'd like to speak to the prices.
If you have to give your name, Rod, if you don't mind.
Oh,
please.
Rod Buckley, Merrimack, 2 Eagle Drive. I'm the prior owner of Buckley Disposal here in town. My son now owns it. Chris had mentioned a couple of prices, and he's not wrong. He had mentioned $300 a ton for Nashua. That's for their demo. Their current rate for trash, when we bring it in weekly, is $80 a ton. For Bow, for the general contractor that would go in with demo and stuff like that, they are $200 a ton. When we go in, as of last week, is $120 a ton. When we go into Ware, which is a fairly new transfer station, we pay $130 a ton. Casella, which we occasionally use in Allenstown, we pay $130 a ton. Their recycling at Casella, which we were using for everywhere except Merrimack, because Merrimack was the only facility that our trucks would physically fit in to empty, they are now $178 a ton for recycling. And it's not single stream. Well, it is single stream. And what we've done is because of that cost is ridiculous, passing it on to the customers, we have stopped recycling in every town except Merrimack, because Merrimack is favorable to us bringing it in as far as dumping and so forth. And quite honestly, if that does jump up to $150, $160 a ton, we will stop recycling in Merrimack also. Our current prices are $44 a month for trash only, and $54 a month if we include recycling. So we pass that extra cost on to our customers for the recycling. And I think that was about it. I just want to make sure you had the correct numbers. And again, his numbers weren't wrong, but I believe he was looking at the C and D numbers, which may have been fed to him by those agencies.
Tom, did you have a question, Rod?
Yeah, the $80 a ton is your tipping cost. So for us right now, it's $78 a ton for our tipping cost. Our charge to
that is what
somebody.
Nashua charges us, $80 a ton.
Oh, okay.
So they obviously have their overhead factored into that. And back in August is when they went up to $300 a ton for C and D.
But they're putting their trash in their landfill. They're not hauling it up to Bow.
Correct. And again, the surrounding
Which is surprising.
transfer stations are
They're running out of
120,
space.
130 range.
I'm actually very surprised at the $80 a ton, because I was just saying to Paul that if you're, if they do have a limited amount of space, I don't know what year they're thinking of running out, but you would think that, I thought it was $300 a ton because I didn't want anybody to bring it in except what they had to take from their own, hauling people. But I appreciate that.
Okay.
Thanks, Rod.
Any other questions before I leave? Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's timing with us. We just pass it through. So I think that the recycling, maybe it is time to contemplate.
We've talked about that. We've talked about that in the past too. At what point do you in fact when it becomes outcosts everything else. And the reality is, the single stream may end up in trash down the road, because we're hearing that it doesn't stay single stream when it gets shipped. It sort of consolidates it all together. It becomes trash anyway down the road. So I think, personally, I was thinking it was the right thing to do. It was, we were doing something for the environment and that kind
It
of
made
thing.
us money in the early part.
Yeah, but even beyond that, because I remember we had people here. I remember they did a presentation. And we said, okay, well, let's do it for a couple of years, even if it's just a break even.
Yeah.
And, because it's the right thing to do. But now, basically, it's just ending up in trash anyway. Because they're not recycling. They're not using the recycling. So I'm sort of with you, Tom.
At $120 a ton extra,
Right.
I'm having a hard time paying. I mean,
Yeah.
when we got paid $10 a ton,
Or even if it was break
you know,
even,
or it was break
I would
even,
feel-
or whatever.
which is what it was for quite a while.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, the past few
So
years.
I'm with you.
But
You know-
if it got back to that level, if you stop it, it's a
Well,
whole.
I'd close the transfer station and or the recycle center and hang on to it. I wouldn't tear it down.
Mhm.
Right.
But, and as hard as it is to get people to recycle, we're only getting, a small percentage total at this point. And if we're paying $120 a ton extra for it,
What would happen to the people in the single stream?
That is a discussion for another, because I
Right.
don't have an
I mean,
answer
that-
for you. I have my suggestions. We kind of talked about it a little bit. We have really not made that in play, so to speak. Kyle and myself, we have had some discussions, but for tonight, I am not prepared to discuss what might happen to those individuals if we close single stream
Like
totally.
transferable skills kind of thing?
Yes and no.
All right, Barbara had something.
Yeah, just a comment that even considering closing down single stream for me gives me heartache, because in 2 prior towns I lived in, I helped start the recycling program. So to even consider closing ours is like,
I fully agree with you, Barbara.
I know.
But $120 or almost twice as much.
I know.
I mean, if it's gonna be 141 to
Yeah.
get rid of regular trash and 265
Well,
get rid of
that
single
part of my
stream.
brain is going wacky too, so.
All right, so,
There's not even a way to redistribute so it's more equitable and palatable.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm thinking even if we went trash up a little bit and the CD up a little bit, bring the single stream down so that they'd still use it.
Now,
I mean,
there are a lot of different scenarios.
These are fake numbers because we're already spending that money for
That's
most of it. There's
I
very little
understand.
commercial that's coming in that we're taking in as extra revenue. So these are all sunk costs. You can say the numbers are here and there, but
Yeah, you
I
maneuver.
mean, how much commercial trash do we bring in?
Chris has those numbers.
Just so I can understand, the commercial trash for the year so far?
Pardon?
You're looking for the commercial trash brought in so far this year?
Yeah,
1,218 tons so far,
out of 6,600, or is that in addition to the 6,600?
out of the 6,600.
1,200
218. That's through November.
through November?
Mhm.
So it's gonna be pretty close to that.
Exactly.
What about,
construction number?
Sure, for commercial,
Yeah.
955 tons.
And that's, again, part of the 1,500, or is that 1,500 a
That's
past
our
year's average?
portion of it,
part of it.
part of it.
Okay,
It's-
but
it's
with that
2/3.
950, you're expecting 1,500 total for the year?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
commercials,
I'm
commercials
just
about
trying to understand
2/3.
if these numbers are based on last year's
Two-thirds of
numbers
the
and we've seen
1,500.
increases, or if these are active numbers.
Yeah, the numbers Chris has.
Kyle, you gotta come to a mic.
I just saw him tell Chris he had to do it. So.
Yeah. Yeah, the numbers Chris is giving you are through November, through yesterday.
Which is almost a year.
That's
they
the
started.
1,200. I'm just trying to understand this trash tonnage number that was used to make the 9,600 for the year expectation is current. It's not.
Yeah, Tom and I got that number based on through October, and we prorated the 2 months.
Okay. It seemed like in the past we were getting like 200 tons of commercial or something like that trash in a year because nobody was bringing it here. Is this 1,200 or 13 or 1,400? Is that a pretty average number over the years, or
It
has
is.
it gone up a lot?
No, it's similar.
Okay.
Kyle, what do you have for recycling commercial?
So commercial recycling is 88 tons, and residential recycling is 1,068 tons, again through November.
So a lot of residential.
Nope, this is through November. Yeah, the numbers Tom had, because he did this calculation a couple of weeks ago, was through October. Chris got us updated numbers today.
So the majority of recycling is coming from the residents. It's not coming from commercial haulers. The majority of C and D, 2/3 of it is coming from commercial haulers. And then about, say, a third, roughly, is the trash is coming from commercial haulers.
That's more than half of the trash. 950 out of 15.
That's 2/3. That's construction.
Okay, I'm sorry.
950 out of 1,500 is construction, so it's about 2/3, is what I'm saying.
I misheard. I thought you said a third.
A third is for residential, is,
No,
is what I'm saying on the trash itself, the chicken bones and
Turkey carcasses.
turkey carcasses. They weigh a lot, by the way.
They do.
So this 88 commercial would presumably all be coming from Buckley because you just told us that nobody else was bringing it. And if
We-
that's the case,
We have two
We have-
commercial recycling groups that bring us recycles,
okay. But they're liable to quit at 150, maybe.
maybe.
And if the council's really looking to go down that road, I'm sure Kyle doesn't have a problem calling up our vendor and saying, you know, we're done. You're not gonna get anything from us on that end.
Can you repeat what you said? You're sure Kyle will have a problem or won't have a
Won't
problem?
have a problem
Thank you.
calling the vendor up and saying,
Thanks,
had a
no thanks.
discussion.
Come get your stuff.
basically, you know, at $150 a ton, it's not worth it for us to recycle because
It'll
it'll
be
just,
a good conversation for him to have.
you know, and maybe he'll sharpen up his pencil a little more. Because they, both Kyle and Tom know that it wasn't a pleasant conversation with me when they told me it was going up to $150 a ton.
I think that would be a good conversation for Kyle to have.
And I'm sure he would not mind having that conversation.
Be happy to.
So tonight though,
We don't have to set it tonight. I would like it tonight
Next meeting.
because
Because you have
because
30-day notice.
because I got a 30 notice, I got to put it in the paper, I got everything. What's the harm if we do it the first meeting in January? It just pushes it out that
The
much.
next meeting, what about the next meeting?
That's kind of packed. That's packed. With the budget presentation and other things that are already on it, it's 2.5, 3 hour meeting.
If we were to shut down single stream, you'd want to rework these numbers and figure out where you think we're going next year kind of thing, or?
We would, and we would have to think about staffing and things of that sort, you know, with it. There's a lot of conversations that we'd have to have, Kyle, myself, Chris, Tom. to figure that out if
I
we're
think
going
we
that
at
route.
least have to see that option before
I
we make
agree.
a decision.
That, I feel the same way.
Okay.
I'd like to know those
We don't,
choices first.
we can just put this, there's a couple of options we can do. We can just say, okay, bring it back in January as part of a separate meeting as, for the budget discussion, because we do have a day in January that we're not meeting. Yeah, it's the Wednesday before the meeting in the January 12th. So we don't have a meeting on the 11th. We could do something like that on the 11th and bring it in as a special meeting to discuss it. On that, if that's sufficed by the council, and it gives us a little time to look at it.
They don't
Yeah.
go into the future.
Yeah, I saw that. We're gonna get new calendars put up here soon.
Yeah, I'd really like to have that.
Yep.
What would be the consequence of stopping single stream in terms of finances, but also related to all of the components and
Personnel.
the impact?
Personnel.
And if in fact there could be a realignment, would you do that, or?
We'd try to realign with them. You know, there's a lot of discussions that would have to occur with it, but we give you the options. The one that we won't be able to give you is public opinion on closing recycling. And that's
understood.
one of the major
Understood.
components as well, is public perception of it.
That will be part of the component discussions.
Yes.
I'm assuming the overhead for trash will go up because you're gonna have 1,500 more tons over there.
Well, the overhead should go down.
How dare you?
Well, the rate should go down, but your overhead pool, I'm assuming, is gonna go up because you're gonna be dealing with more.
Yeah, the overhead, well, here's the discussion, it depends on the personnel and the other item costs, because that all plays into it. But our tipping fees will go up for sure. You know, it'll go down, the budget will go down, but you're right, that 1,500 will have to slide someplace. It'll have to get into the trash stream.
Yeah. All right. So. What do you,
I got my marching orders.
okay.
I'll bring it back to
Plug it
you
into-
January 11th. We have a meeting, so write that on your calendars.
Very good.
So
All right. Thanks.
That was
Tom.
one we didn't have before. Is that what you just said? You're adding a meeting?
I was going to add a meeting on the 11th, if that's pleasure of the council.
Kind of have to, because I think you're right.
Yeah, we have.
It's going to be a longer discussion
Yeah.
than,
But we have a meeting on the 5th and the 19th anyway, right?
Yep.
Council meetings?
Yes.
well, you have a meeting on the 5th for budget. The 12th is a regular council meeting.
Oh, the 12th.
The
and
18th and
26th,
19th
yeah.
is budget meetings. So I left the 11th off kind of as a snow date, and if
Or discussion on
some of
tipping
these-
fees.
some of these, you know, we always have one of these that we need to have an extra
Yeah.
discussion, so we can do that on the 11th.
I'm looking at the author of this PowerPoint presentation.
Keith.
Anyhow,
I think he's been gone for
for a little bit.
a little bit.
Yeah, probably not.
All right.
He's coming back.
Thanks, guys. Well, I'm sure we'll see you before, but we'll see you on the 11th or whatever the date was.
Yeah, we'll get the information. That gives us some time to actually work it through.
Thanks, Rod.
All right. Well, that first item under new business, Tom, the Finance Director, Tom Bowen, will review the key financial information for the quarter ending September 30th,
With me if we go
2022. Did you want to make that motion?
Yes.
Motion by
Second.
Lon and seconded by
10 beyond
Barbara
10,
to go beyond the 10 p.m. curfew. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstained, 700. Thanks, Lon. And Tom, it's all yours.
Okay, we can have more fun with numbers.
These guys love that stuff.
Yeah.
Sick.
So it is time to look at the financial results for the first quarter of the fiscal year. That would be the period from July 1 2022 to September 30th, 2022. And despite inflation, which is all over the news and in everybody's thoughts and minds, I can report that through the first quarter that overall our numbers have come in line with our budgeted projections. And we have no real red flags or major areas of concern through that first quarter of the fiscal year. That's not to say that we aren't feeling the effect of inflation, because we are, but it's primarily affecting our major and minor capital projects. If you look at our regular operating budget, the vast majority of our expenses are personnel related, and associated benefits and things of that sort. So relatively speaking, those items are not seeing the effects because a significant amount of the benefit costs and all of the salary costs are really controlled for the fiscal year by union contracts and the voted budget, and then our health insurance and retirement contributions are contractually fixed for the fiscal year. So certainly if inflation were to persist at the current levels over the long term, there's a high degree of certainty that those contractual costs will increase in the future, and could affect future operating budgets. But thankfully, at least for the time being, the current year looks okay. So while we are seeing inflation impact the cost of the stuff that we need to buy to deliver the services to the town, hasn't yet risen to the level where we need to be concerned about having sufficient appropriations to fund the operations for the current fiscal year. So as we normally do, I took a look at some of our major areas of expenditures. The first of which is health insurance costs. This is showing a small increase. And actually, the health insurance rates were flat to slightly down from the prior fiscal year. So the small increase that we're seeing is really a function of the number of full-time employees enrolled during the quarter and the mix of the coverage types between single and two-person and family. So, but the total expenditures on health insurance for the first quarter of $814,000. If you look at the total annual budget of $3.7 million, we're at 22% through the first quarter. So, tracking on a good level as far as that goes. If we look at New Hampshire retirement costs, we're seeing a small increase there as well. The rates are actually flat from the prior fiscal year. So the slight increase that you see in retirement is really a function of the annual wage increases that were part of the voter-approved operating budget and the union contracts that went into effect as of July 1 of 2022. That really captures the rate, and we obviously budgeted for that. So if you look at our total retirement expenditures for the first quarter of $792,000 compared to an annual budget of almost $3.5 million. Again, we're at 22.7% for a quarter of the year, so kind of pretty much right where you would expect we would be. Overtime, this is going to be a fairly similar picture to what we've seen over quite a few quarters now. Overtime is running high. in large part due to difficulties in filling open positions. And certainly in fire and police, obviously you need a certain minimum level of coverage regardless of whether you have open positions or not. So the way you get that is by using overtime to fund that. So if you look at the chart on the bottom, the numbers on the bottom, the areas where we're over 25% of our budget usage already through the first quarter are fire at 29%, police at 36.4%, communications or dispatch at 67%. That's kind of high because it's on a relatively lower total dollar volume. That's why the percentages is kind of out of whack there. And actually solid waste, we're at 50% of our overtime budget. Now, part of that is that reflects the summer months where we do the extended hours on Thursday nights. So that only really affects that first quarter of the year. So we would expect to spend more than a kind of a pro rata 25% of our overtime. But there's also overtime in there due to the increase in trash volumes that we've seen. Kind of ties back into somewhat of the discussion that we've just had.
Additionally, we've had some. Well, they gotta turn up my mic. Additionally, we had some long-term illnesses that we had to cover
In solid waste.
in solid waste, and fortunately, they've all returned back to work, so that number should be decreasing.
Yeah.
And fire, they're at 29%. But remember, they've been running without a lieutenant since the retirement of one of the captains, the promotion of a captain to the assistant chief position. So they've been running short staff for quite a few, like almost 2 months. So you're going to start seeing that now that they're hiring next week, that to start coming back down as well.
So there are in virtually all of these instances savings in the wages components of the budgeted line items that at least partially offset, if not mostly offset, the increases in these overtime numbers. So if we look, this is a little bit difficult or challenging to see, but if you do look at total expenses on a department by department basis, and I like to focus on the left side of this schedule, not so much as on the right, but we've got our annual budget, the expenditures through the first quarter, and the balance of the budget. So the difference between those two numbers, what's left in the budget to spend compared to or on a percentage basis to the total. So you'd hope through the first quarter of the year that you have 75% or more left to spend on your operating budgets on a department by department basis. And you can see for the most part that is true. There's only 3 instances where it's not, and there are reasons for that. That we typically see the same thing every year. The welfare department, it's a small department, and then also they send out 100% of their health services payments to the agencies that service the town of Merrimack. They do that at the very beginning of the budget year. So as the first week in July, 100% of those payments go out. So that kind of skews the spend on the welfare department. Everything else is in line there. Debt service payments we make twice a year, once in the first quarter and once in the third quarter. So you would expect that we would have spent half through the first quarter of the year, and that's right where that's at. And then the revolving fund is the other one where we've got 44% of the budget remaining, but that's because of camp. Camp really is all concentrated in that first quarter of the fiscal year. So we're really, there's not an issue there either. The encumbrances sometimes we talk about, but those are monies that we've committed to spend in the future. They don't necessarily relate to the first quarter, but we got contracts, purchase orders, and whatnot to spend that money at some point down the road during the current fiscal year. So that even with encumbrances, most of the departments still have 75% or more of their budget remaining through the end of the first quarter. The ones that don't are because they have large contracts that kind of skew the numbers. In the case of highway and the library and buildings and grounds, and we got the same story that we had before encumbrances for welfare, debt service, and the revolving fund. But wastewater also has significant commitments. They do purchase orders for 100% of the chemicals and materials that they use during the year. That's reflected in that encumbrances column. So that's why the numbers look a little different there. But generally, the message is all looks good on the expenditure front.
So, if I might, can you remind me why welfare pays out all the money that they're going to pay out 100% to the health services and whatnot at the beginning of the year and not 50-50 split like you do with debt service?
I'd be speculating a little bit. I don't know if Paul has a better answer, but that's the way it's been done historically. I think we do it as an accommodation to them so that they have all of the money and don't have to worry about timing of payment in terms of being able to provide the services that they do.
A lot of them are small amounts. They just add up because there's a lot of them. A lot of them are $5,000 or less. So it doesn't make sense to break them out 2,500 and 2,500. So we pay them. There's a couple of big ones there's one I think that's right around $15,000, and that's still not a big amount. So that's why it's $70,000. It's like $72,000 is the total for all the help that we provide. And so that's why we pay it out front, because there's really small amounts. We used to have one that was quite large when I first got here, and we used to pay that quarterly. But even since then, that one's dwindled down to that's the one that's $15,000 now. So that's why we do that. The reason why there's a large encumbrance in DPW or highway is because that's the paving money. Even though we paved, they're sometimes slow in getting us the bill. Matter of fact, I just signed off on the bill today for over $500,000 of that $1.4 million. So, and paving's been done since August.
Yeah.
So that's why that one's large, with the encumbrances. And like Tom said, we do a lot of contracts with the sewer plant for chemicals and sawdust, and that's why we encumber the money, because we go ahead and do those contracts at the beginning of the year to get a better rate.
Okay, thank you.
So then we usually take a look at revenues as well, make sure there's no big surprises there. We've been closely following the auto registrations, which just continue to chug along. Now, I'm still somewhat a little bit concerned about those numbers. Certainly the the hikes in interest rates that have happened since May. There's going to be a lag effect there, but just like the increase in home mortgage rates have kind of tamped down the demand for housing, the increase in interest rates is going to affect rates on auto loans as well, and I would expect that's going to have an impact, but we haven't seen it yet. The number is down very slightly from the past 2 years, but it's still tracking with the $5.6 million that we have budgeted for the total fiscal year. We're at 26% of that annual budget through the first quarter. I know I've looked at October numbers as well that continued to track with the annual budget. I know that number's gonna drop at some point, but we have not seen it yet. But we will continue to pay close attention. Building permits.
Before you go on,
Yeah.
the other reason we're comfortable is because of all these new apartments. More registrations coming in.
Right.
Even though people are buying out their leases and that comes down, we've been seeing more new registrations. A lot of people are taking advantage of renewing online, but coming into the building to register vehicles, or either a new car or first-time registrants in the town of Merrimack. So with the new apartments, we are seeing some new auto registrations coming through as well. The other thing is we're starting to see some people in Merrimack going green with the electric cars, and they've been pulling in to the parking lot. Hybrids have been pulling into the parking lot now because gas prices are high. The Polestar, I've seen 4 of them in the last month and a half. Polestar is a 100% electric car, and they bring them in a trailer, and they unload them from the trailer, and they come and register them. They're out of Boston, so they buy them from Massachusetts, and they bring them in. Polestar is an electric car, and I've seen, like I said, 4 of them in the last 2 months coming to town. So people are trying to get the alternative vehicles and buying those and things of that stuff.
So does that impact our auto registrations in some way or another?
It will help our auto registrations, what I'm saying, by
Because of new
they're
cars.
getting rid of their gas guzzlers, and some people are trying to be more green.
Yeah, but higher cost and
They're
therefore
higher
higher
cost cars,
registration.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not seeing the Cadillac Escalades as much pulling in with templates on them. I'm seeing a lot of Jeeps. I'm seeing a lot of hybrids. I'm seeing a lot of electric cars. Not a lot, but I'm seeing more electric cars than I've seen in years past with people coming in to register them. So
I was just trying to understand why you were talking about things coming into the parking lot, because we don't have charging stations or anything like
no,
that in our
but
parking lot. So
yeah, but
didn't see
these
where
are
it
the
was
new
impacting
vehicles. You noticing these new vehicles come in with the templates on and things of that sort. So, the $5.6 million, we'll keep an eye on it. It's like a yin and a yang with the interest. Interest rates are low. We get no interest, but we get more registration fees. Interest rates go up, we get better interest rates. Registrations come down, so they kind of level themselves off as you look as they go through.
Right. Building permits, another number we look at, typically we're at 32.5% of the budget through the first quarter. Obviously, that's somewhat impacted by weather. Usually the first quarter and the fourth quarter are our biggest quarters for building permits, but generally we're pretty much comfortable that we're right on track with the annual budget on building permits as well. I know I've been here whining about interest on our cash reserves for the last several years. I can finally report that there is one upside to the increases in interest rates that we've all experienced, is that we're earning significantly higher returns on our cash reserves. we're at $170,000 through the first quarter of the year. Last year we were at 19,000. So that's a little improvement there. We're at 39% of our annual budget. So we should have some excess there, as long as, they are saying that possible that they may have to bring rates down again, but I don't expect that probably to impact this fiscal year. So we're in good shape as far as that goes. And if there are any other questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
Just a comment. With the presentation, lovely presentation. But those lines on the back, on the, well, if you're looking at them on the screen, you see all those lines that are there? Makes it kind of hard to read the numbers.
Does it?
And also it takes more ink to print them.
True.
So
Yeah. Okay.
just a thought.
Yep.
Thank you.
Good idea.
I won't need a double magnifying glass.
All right. Thank you, Tom. Nothing else on the agenda, no minutes, comments from the press, there's no press, comments from the public, there's no public, comments from the council. Seeing none. Motion by Lon, seconded by Barbara, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, abstained, 700. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.